Once, in a place where silence itself seemed alive, something small and strange began to stir. It wasn't a hero, nor a monster, nor even a star. It was something in between, something forgotten yet unforgettable. And tonight I want to tell you about it. But first, know this. We truly care for you, and you're safe here. Wherever you are in the world, whoever you are, this story is for you. Before we begin, tell us, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now take a slow breath, hold your coffee close, and let's drift into the tale together. Once, before the stars were even awake, there was a sound so faint you could mistake it for nothing at all. It was not thunder, not music, not even breath. It was the whisper of something waiting to exist. And in that waiting, in that pause before the first spark, a story began to unfold. A story of shadows and kindness, of strange laughter that survived in silence, and of a world that would one day bloom into ooh. You may not know it yet, but you are safe here. This tale is soft, a lantern glowing against the dark. It isn't a tale of wars or grand battles. It is the quiet song of how something small and forgotten found its way through endless time. And because you're here listening with us tonight, you've become part of it too. We love you for that, truly. So before we drift further into the story, pause for just a moment. Where are you in the world right now? What time is it where you sit, eyes heavy, listening? Hold your cup of coffee or maybe tea close to your hands. Feel its warmth. Now let's step softly into the beginning. The whisper was older than memory. It had no mouth, no body, and yet it carried a feeling as though the universe itself longed not to be alone. In the velvet dark, the whisper curled like smoke, reaching, until at last it touched a spark. That spark flickered and became a child's laughter. It was thin at first, almost fragile yet steady. Though sound carried across the void. If you closed your eyes then, you might have believed that laughter belonged to you, but it belonged to no one. And it belonged to everything. From that laugh, shadows began to stir. They were not menacing shadows, not the kind you shrink away from in fear. They were soft and wandering, like curious clouds without a sky. They brushed against each other, testing the edges of what might one day be called form. And somewhere inside those shadows, something new was forming. Not a god, not a monster, not a star. Something in between. Some would one day call it Golb, a being of contradictions, of endings and beginnings intertwined. But in that first moment, Golb was no destroyer. It was only a quiet pulse, a presence without words, a silence that hummed like a lullaby. And near this silence, a child appeared. He was not born as other children are. He was simply there, small, barefooted, with eyes wide as moons, and hair falling in untidy tufts across his brow. He did not cry. He did not speak. He only looked around at the shadows that swirled like strange companions and reached out his tiny hand. The shadows bent toward him, as though eager to be held. He laughed again. That laugh was different from the first. It was warmer, more human, though no one had taught him what it meant to be human. The shadows seemed to lean into it, drinking from the sound. Already, without knowing, he carried something rare, the ability to change silence into comfort, the power to make emptiness less lonely. He grew slowly, though there was no real time yet to measure growth. The universe itself was his cradle. He wandered barefoot along invisible ground, picking up little fragments of what might one day become matter, stones that hummed faint notes when pressed to his ear, clouds that shivered into drops of silver rain when touched. He kept these things close, not because he needed them, but because they seemed to need him. When he sat in silence, the shadows gathered near. They seemed to listen. They seemed to wait. Sometimes, when the loneliness pressed too hard upon him, he would hum, just a small tune, something without melody, rising and falling like waves, and the shadows would echo it back, like a soft chorus. This was how the boy first learned what it meant to be alive, not in words but in echoes, in the tender rhythm of give and return. He did not know he was shaping the beginning of worlds. The boy did not name himself. Names had no meaning yet, but in his quiet heart, he began to carry shapes of who he might be. A listener, a collector of whispers, a child of silence who laughed at the edge of the void. There were moments when he would pause and feel something vast watching him. Not cruel, not kind, just watching. It was Golb, though he had no way to know it. A presence that both comforted and unsettled him. Sometimes he would try to hum to it, offering his tune like a gift, and sometimes, though faint, he thought he felt the silence hum back. Nights and days did not yet exist, but there were rhythms of stillness and movement, as if the universe were breathing. In the stretches of stillness, the boy would curl against a drifting stone, closing his eyes, though he had no need for sleep. He dreamed of things that had not yet been created, fields of soft grass bending in wind, rivers flowing with laughter instead of water, sandwiches, though he had never seen or tasted food, stacked high and shared between friends he had yet to meet. These dreams were his teachers. They whispered to him that one day life would not only exist, it would be shared, and so he learned patience. He learned to wait. Sometimes in the quiet, he imagined that somewhere far beyond what he could see another child laughed too. Her sister, perhaps, or a friend. He could not hear her, not really, but in his heart he felt it. Another laugh carried like a secret across the void. He smiled when he thought of her, though he didn't know her face. That smile was his first bond. Invisible, fragile, yet real. The universe stretched slowly, unfolding like a long, deep breath. And with each breath the boy grew, not taller, not older, but fuller in spirit. He carried more shadows with him now, and they no longer frightened him. He had discovered their gentleness, their eagerness to belong. He whispered to them when he felt lonely, and though they never answered, he always felt understood. One day, though there was no day to name, it seemed to him that the shadows gathered more tightly than usual. They pressed around him in a circle, pulsing softly as though waiting for something. He sat down, folding his legs beneath him. He pressed his palms together. He breathed. And then very quietly he whispered, "Hello." The shadows trembled as if they had been waiting for that word. A small echo rose and fell, carrying the syllables outward. "Hello? Hello? Hello?" The boy's heart fluttered. He laughed again, and the laugh was caught, echoed, and returned to him like a warm blanket wrapped around his shoulders. For the first time, he realized he was not alone. Perhaps he had never been alone. This was the origin, though no history would record it. The whisper before creation, the laugh before the first sunrise, the boy before the first story. And somewhere in the unseen folds of time, a presence, Golb, watched. Not as destroyer, not yet as chaos, but as witness. And though no one would ever truly know, perhaps even Golb felt something stir then. Something it had never felt before, the faintest tug of companionship. The boy slept, if sleep can be said to exist in the arms of nothing. Shadows curled around him, keeping watch. He dreamed of stars not yet lit, of voices not yet heard, of love not yet born. And if you listened closely, very closely, you could hear his whisper drifting across the silence, "I'm here." And in that moment, everything that would ever come to be, light. Stars, oceans, laughter, sorrow, sandwiches, kingdoms, even endings was contained inside those two words, "I'm here." And with that, the beginning became real. There was no sun yet, no moon to count the hours, but time still passed in its own quiet way. It passed in breaths, in pulses of silence, in the way shadows thickened and thinned around the boy as he wandered. He did not measure time as we do. He measured it in feelings, how lonely or how full his heart felt, how long it had been since he laughed. He wandered barefoot across invisible ground, though there was no ground at all, only drifting shapes of what might one day become soil, stone, and sky. He moved carefully, as though every step could break something delicate. Perhaps that was his first kindness, to treat even the emptiest silence with respect. The shadows followed him. They were not solid, not liquid, not even air. They were moods given shape, fragments of what the universe had not yet decided to be. Sometimes they leaned long and thin like reaching arms. Sometimes they curled into soft puddles like sleeping animals. And sometimes they shimmered faintly, as though holding pieces of memory that did not belong to him. He collected them, though not in the way you might gather stones or feathers. He collected them in his heart. He noticed each one, gave it a little space beside him, and let it follow. In this way he became something more than just a boy. He became a keeper of forgotten things, a friend to what had no name. Once he found a shadow that trembled. It hovered at the edge of his vision, flickering like a candle about to die. He reached out his hand, but the shadow recoiled, afraid of being touched. The boy did not chase it. He simply sat down, folded his knees to his chest, and waited. After a long silence, he hummed a tune, slow, steady, like a lullaby without words. The trembling shadow quivered, hesitated, and at last inched closer. It rested at his side, fragile but safe. The boy smiled. "It's all right," he whispered, though the shadow could not understand words. Perhaps it understood tone or warmth, or simply the stillness of being accepted. From that moment, the trembling shadow followed him wherever he went, always just a little behind like a shy companion, and so it was with many others. He never chose which shadows stayed or which slipped away. He only walked and listened, letting them decide. Some would drift with him for a while and then fade back into the void. Others lingered longer, circling around him as if protecting him. He never called them his, never tried to claim them. They were friends, not possessions. One day, or what would have been a day if days existed, he came upon a strange sight. A shadow sat in the shape of a chair. It was sturdy, almost solid, as though daring him to sit. The boy tilted his head, curious. He lowered himself into the shape, and to his surprise the chair shadow held his weight. He laughed, and the sound rang out across the stillness. Other shadows quivered, shifting their shapes into tables, cushions, even something like a small lantern. The boy clapped his hands in delight. Without knowing it, he had encouraged them to play. The void, once empty, now felt like a room slowly filling with furniture of imagination. It was strange and comforting, like a dream building itself around him. But with play came loneliness too. He noticed that no matter how many shadows gathered, none of them spoke back. None of them had eyes that met his own or hands to hold. He felt the ache of wanting another voice, another heart that was not just an echo of his own. That night, though there was no night, he curled up against a shadow shaped like a pillow. He closed his eyes, letting himself drift into the in-between place of dreams. In his dream he saw a girl. She stood across a field that did not yet exist, her hair lifting in wind that had not yet been born. She did not speak, but she smiled, and the smile was so gentle it felt like an answer to every question in his heart. He reached for her, but the dream dissolved, and he woke alone. Still, he remembered the smile. He carried it with him like a lantern. Perhaps she was real. Perhaps she was only his longing given shape. So either way, she made the loneliness softer. The boy began to notice something else about his shadows. Each one seemed to hold a piece of story. When he touched them gently, images flickered across his mind, moments that were not his own. A tear falling into water, a song sung in a language he didn't know, a pair of hands tying a knot in rope. These were memories that belonged to no one yet, echoes of futures not yet lived. He became the boy who collected shadows, but also the boy who collected fragments of tomorrow. Sometimes he grew tired. Carrying so many fragments weighed on him, though not in the way you might imagine. It was not his body that felt heavy. It was his heart. Too many voices pressed against him. Too many feelings curled around his spirit. He would lie down, eyes closed, and let the shadows drift away until only one or two remained. Then he would breathe again. It was in these moments of rest that he began to understand balance. He could not hold everything. He could not be everything. But he could be present moment by moment, and that was enough. One quiet stretch, he found himself humming again. The tune was different now, deeper, slower, almost like a question. To his surprise, the shadows answered, not in words but in a soft vibration, like a choir humming in the distance. He sat very still, listening. It felt like a conversation without language, a bond deeper than thought. Tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was joy. Perhaps it was the ache of knowing this moment would pass. Either way, he let the tears fall, and the shadows caught them, wrapping them in gentle folds of darkness. The boy realized something then. He was not only collecting shadows. He was being collected too. The universe itself was gathering him, holding him, learning from his laughter, his humming, his quiet acts of care. He whispered into the silence. "Thank you." The shadows stirred as though bowing in return. In this way, he grew, not taller, not older, but deeper. His heart stretched to hold more than his own small life. He became a vessel of echoes, a listener of things not yet born, a friend to silence itself. And though he did not know it, far away in the folds of void, Golb watched again. The presence lingered, patient and wordless, drawn not by power, but by the strange softness of a boy who cared for shadows. If you had been there, listening in that moment, you might have felt it too, the first thread of story weaving itself into what would one day become ooh, a thread spun not from conquest, but from kindness. The boy curled into his nest of shadows, eyes heavy. He dreamed again of the girl in the field, her smile waiting like dawn. The shadows swayed gently, as if rocking him to sleep, and somewhere in the vastness silence itself seemed to whisper back, "You are not alone." The boy had grown used to his shadows. They were companions in their way, gentle listeners that echoed his laughter, softened his loneliness, and held his whispered dreams. But still, beneath all their quiet presence, something remained missing, a space shaped like another heart. It was not an emptiness he resented. It was more like a question, one he carried with patience. Some evenings, though evenings had no names yet, he would sit with his knees to his chest and gaze into the not-quite sky, wondering, "Is there someone else?" he whispered, though the shadows only swayed. "Someone who understands what I mean even when I don't have words." The universe had a way of listening, and sometimes when it listened long enough, it answered. One stretch of silence, as he wandered across a drifting plain of silver dust, he noticed something unusual. Among the shadows that trailed him, one moved differently. It was not dark like the rest. It shimmered faintly, carrying a soft glow like a star trapped in a veil. It darted quickly, then slowed, then darted again, as though testing the air. The boy tilted his head, curious. "Hello?" The glowing shadow hesitated. Then with a tremble it drew itself upward, stretching thin, then wider, until it became a shape almost like his own. Arms, legs, a head with a faint outline of hair, and then eyes. They were not fully formed, not yet, but in the faint glow he felt them looking at him, not watching, like Golb's presence, not listening, like the shadows, but looking with recognition. The boy's heart leapt. For the first time he felt truly seen. He stepped forward slowly, careful not to startle the fragile form. "Are you like me?" he asked. The glowing figure wavered, then steadied. It tilted its head, mirroring him. And then, softly, it laughed. The sound was thin, shy, but unmistakably laughter. The boy laughed in return, his voice breaking with joy. He clapped his hands, and the glowing figure clapped too. The echo carried between them like a bridge, and for the first time he was not alone in the sound. He did not know what to call her, but in his heart, she felt like a sister. Not by blood, not by origin, but by recognition. The way two stars shine brighter when they burn beside one another. She was his starling sister, a light among shadows. They wandered together. At first she stayed close, hesitant to drift far. She would walk a few steps behind, then catch up, then linger at his side. When he hummed, she hummed back, her voice slightly higher, weaving with his like threads in cloth. When he paused to collect fragments of memory from shadows, she watched with curious wonder. Sometimes she would reach out, and the shadow would flicker toward her as though curious in return. The boy found himself speaking more often now, even if she could not always answer. "This one," he would say, holding a shadow that carried the image of rain falling on stone. "It feels like a song. Do you feel it too?" The girl tilted her head, eyes glowing faintly, and nodded. He smiled, warmth swelling in his chest. Days, or the measure of what could be called days, passed like this. They grew comfortable in each other's company. They played small games, shaping shadows into new forms, a bird, a tree, a river that curled across the void. They sat inside those imagined places, resting side by side, pretending the void was already a world. One time he shaped a shadow into the form of a sandwich. It was clumsy, uneven, but recognizable. He held it out to her, grinning. "It's food," he explained, though he didn't know why he knew the word. She looked puzzled at first, then reached to take it, mimicking his bite. They both laughed, though neither could taste it. The boy thought, this is what it means to share. Yet even with laughter there were quiet moments. Times when she grew distant, her glow dimming, her shape wavering like a flame in wind. He would reach for her then, frightened she might vanish. "Don't go," he whispered. "Please stay." She always returned, steadier after a pause, but those moments planted a soft ache in his heart. He realized she was fragile, not permanent. She was a gift, but one the universe might one day take back. That knowledge made him cherish her more. Together they explored the drifting landscapes of shadows. They found a hollow where voices lingered, echoes of words never spoken. They sat together, listening as the air carried fragments. "I miss you. Please wait. Someday." Neither understood fully, but they leaned against one another, letting the words wash over them like rain. They discovered a river made of light, flowing without source or end. They stepped into it, laughing as it lifted their feet from the invisible ground, carrying them gently downstream. He reached for her hand, and for the first time she held it. Her fingers were faint, almost transparent, but warm enough to make him shiver. The boy whispered, "I think I was waiting for you." The starling sister looked at him, her glow softening, and nodded. In that nod, he felt everything he had been searching for, confirmation that the longing inside him was not a mistake. That somewhere in the vastness someone understood. The boy grew different with her. His humming became songs. His laughter became deeper, brighter. Even his silences felt full, no longer empty but shared. When he closed his eyes, he no longer dreamed alone. He dreamed of her beside him, their shadows weaving into the same patterns. One evening, though there were still no evenings, he asked her, "Where did you come from?" She tilted her head, searching for words she did not have. At last she pointed upward, toward the endless dark where no stars yet burned. Then she touched his chest, right over his heart. "From there," he guessed softly. She smiled. He did not press further. Some mysteries are too tender to unravel. There were times, though rare, when the presence of Golb stirred in the distance. The boy felt it watching, heavy and strange. But with the starling sister at his side, the weight no longer frightened him. He would squeeze her hand, and she would squeeze back, and together they faced the silence. It was during one of these moments that the boy realized something new. It wasn't only that he had found her. It was that she had found him. Out of all the endless emptiness, she had chosen to appear here with him. That thought filled him with awe so profound it almost broke him. He whispered to her as they lay side by side among the shadows, "If you ever go away, I'll still remember you." Her glow flickered softly. She leaned close, pressing her forehead to his. No words, only warmth. And in that warmth he understood. Even if she was only borrowed, even if she faded, she had already given him more than he could ever lose. The starling sister closed her eyes then, as though teaching him something new, trusting the silence enough to rest inside it. The boy followed, letting his breath match hers, letting the universe cradle them both. Shadows swayed gently, as if rocking them to sleep, and far away the first seeds of stars trembled, waiting for the day they would ignite. The boy and his starling sister wandered together for what might have been ages, though no clock yet existed to mark it. Their laughter softened the void, and their silences filled it with meaning. The shadows followed them faithfully, weaving gentle shapes, trees without roots, rivers without water, homes without doors, fragile hints of what might one day become real. Yet for all their joy, the boy began to notice something strange. Not every shadow stayed. Some that had followed him faithfully, some that had hummed along to his songs and wrapped him in warmth, would one day slip away without warning. He would wake from a dream to find them gone, their echoes vanished into the void. He would search, calling softly, but they never returned. It hurt him. He felt the loss like a hollow in his chest. "Why do they leave?" he whispered to his sister, though she could not answer. She only held his hand, her glow dimming in sympathy. One quiet stretch after losing yet another shadow companion, the boy sat alone upon a floating shard of stone. He folded his knees, his head bowed. "Am I doing something wrong?" he asked the silence. "Is it because I couldn't keep them safe?" The void, usually still, stirred. A figure appeared before him. Not shadow, not glow, but something in between. It was tall, cloaked in folds of grey that rippled like smoke. Its face was hidden, though faint eyes gleamed within the hood. Ancient eyes, not cruel, not kind, simply full of knowing. The boy startled, clutching his sister's hand. But the figure lifted one long hand, palm open, in a gesture of peace. Its voice, when it came, was like the wind in tall grass, soft, steady, carrying a rhythm older than time. "Child of silence," it said. "Why do you grieve?" The boy blinked. His voice trembled. "They go away. The shadows. They stay for a while and then they vanish. I don't understand." The figure lowered itself to sit across from him, mirroring his posture. For a moment it did not speak, only let the quiet stretch between them until the boy's heart calmed. Then it said, "They are not gone. They have only returned to where they belong. You are their friend, but not their keeper." The boy frowned. "But if I love them, shouldn't I hold on? Shouldn't I keep them close?" The figure shook its hooded head gently. Love is not the holding. Love is the seeing. Love is the time shared. When they go, you do not lose them. You carry the shape they left in you. That is their gift. And your gift to them is letting them go. The boy's eyes filled with tears. But it hurts. Yes, the figure whispered. It always will. That is how you know the love was real. The boy looked down, uncertain. His sister leaned close, resting her head on his shoulder, her glow soft and steady. He touched her hair gently, taking comfort in her nearness. The figure extended its hand. In its palm appeared a small, fragile light, no brighter than a firefly. This, it said, is the gift of forgetting. The boy hesitated. Forgetting? But I don't want to forget. The figure shook its head. Not forgetting the love, not forgetting the kindness, only forgetting the ache. The wound of absence fades, so that memory can rest gently. To hold everything tightly is to break. To release is to grow. The boy reached for the light. It floated into his palm, warm and soft. As it touched his skin, he felt the ache inside him ease, not vanish, not erased, but softened, as though wrapped in cloth. He could still remember the shadows that had left, but now the memory carried no sharp edges, only warmth. He looked up at the figure, awe in his eyes. Thank you. The figure bowed its hooded head. Do not thank me. Thank the leaving. Thank the space they make within you. Without forgetting, there can be no room for what comes next. The boy held the light close to his chest. His sister's glow brightened beside him, as if to say she understood. For many breaths they sat together in silence. The boy felt lighter, not because he had lost less, but because he had learned how to carry it. He thought of the shadows who had gone, and for the first time he smiled. When he looked up again, the cloaked figure was fading, becoming part of the void. Its final words lingered like an echo. Everything returns. Everything leaves. Everything matters. And still, you go on, the boy whispered after it. Will I see you again? But no answer came. Only the faint shimmer of eyes dissolving into darkness. The boy sat quietly, letting the truth settle. His sister curled beside him, her head against his shoulder, and together they watched the emptiness with new peace. He realized then that forgetting was not the enemy of love. It was the soft ground that let love take root, the soil where memory could rest without crushing the heart. That night, though nights had no stars yet, he dreamed differently. He dreamed not of holding everything tightly, but of letting go. In his dream, shadows drifted away one by one, their forms dissolving into silver mist. He reached for them, but instead of clutching, he waved. Goodbye, he whispered, and each goodbye felt like planting a seed in the dark. Seeds that one day would bloom. When he woke, he felt lighter. The boy and his starling sister walked on, and when the next shadow left, as surely it did, he placed his hand over his heart, smiled softly and whispered, Thank you. The ache remained, but gentler now, like the ache of a song fading into silence. Still humming in the bones, he understood. This was not the end of companionship. It was the beginning of memory. And memory, even softened by forgetting, was a gift he would carry forever. The boy had grown used to the quiet of the void, the way it stretched without edge, without weight, without any clear beginning or end. Yet after the figure of grey had left him with the gift of forgetting, something within him had changed. The emptiness no longer seemed only empty. It seemed waiting. Waiting for something to bloom. He and his starling sister walked hand in hand, and as they walked the silence grew less silent. At first it was only the faintest sound, a hum he thought might be his imagination. But soon it grew steadier, like the breath of someone asleep. A lullaby without words. Do you hear it? He whispered. His sister tilted her head, her glow flickering faintly, and though she could not speak, her eyes told him yes, they followed the sound. It rose and fell like waves against a shore, though the boy had never seen a sea. The hum became a song, a weaving of tones so soft it seemed the void itself was dreaming aloud. At last they arrived at its source. Before them stretched a vast garden. Not a garden as mortals would know with soil and roots, but a dream garden, suspended in the dark like a tapestry unfurled. Flowers floated in the air, each glowing faintly with its own light. Their petals shimmered like the edges of bubbles, soft and translucent, shifting colors with every sigh. The garden pulsed with music. Each flower sang, not with words but with tones. Some rang bright and clear like bells, others deep and slow like distant thunder. Together they wove a harmony so tender the boy's chest ached with it. He stepped closer, his hand trembling. As he brushed one glowing petal, it shivered and let out a note pure as moonlight. He gasped, laughing in wonder. "It sings when you touch it." His sister reached for another blossom. When her light brushed its stem, a lower note joined the first, the two sounds twining together like hands. The siblings smiled, and for a while they simply played, touching flowers, making songs rise like fireflies in the dark. Yet the boys soon noticed something deeper. The music was not random. It shifted with his heart. When he touched the blossoms while sad, the tones bent soft and mournful. When joy welled up, the flowers answered with bright chords. When he felt lonely, a trembling, searching note rose as though the garden itself longed to comfort him. It was a mirror, he realized. A mirror of sound. He sank into the garden lying among the blossoms. Their glow painted his skin silver, their voices weaving around him. He closed his eyes. The garden seemed to breathe with him. He felt seen, held, as though the void itself had made a cradle for him. Time moved differently here. Days and nights were not yet born, but the boy felt cycles within cycles. Sometimes the garden sang loud, filling him with strength. Other times it sang faintly, just a whisper, lulling him toward sleep. He and his sister stayed, learning the rhythms, learning themselves. One night, their first true night, for the void seemed darker then, the boy dreamed within the garden. In his dream, the flowers rose like stars, drifting upward until the whole sky was full of them. Each one carried a memory, the laugh of a shadow friend, the comfort of his sister's hand, the gift of light given by the figure in grey. The flowers spun slowly, like lanterns on invisible strings, and their song became words, not in any tongue he knew, but in a rhythm his heart understood. To love is to listen, to grow is to let go, to be is to sing. When he woke, tears clung to his lashes. He pressed his palms against his chest and whispered, "I will remember." His sister stirred beside him. She touched his cheek, glowing faintly, as if to remind him he was never alone. The garden became their home for a long while. The boy learned to walk its glowing paths, to lean against blossoms that hummed with low, steady notes. He learned that some flowers closed when touched, retreating shyly into themselves while others opened wide, releasing cascades of sound that lifted him into laughter. It was in this garden that he began to change. He noticed one day, while tracing a spiral of glowing vines, that his hands no longer looked the same. They shimmered faintly the way the flowers did. Light swirled beneath his skin, not constant but pulsing like a heartbeat. His sister touched his wrist, her eyes wide, but she did not seem afraid. She only smiled softly, as though she had known all along. The boy lifted his hand, watching it glow faintly. "Am I turning into the garden?" His sister shook her head, pressing her forehead gently to his. He understood her answer without words. No. The garden was becoming part of him. He wandered further that night, touching blossoms and listening as their tones blended with the faint glow beneath his skin. The more he listened, the clearer it became. The songs of the flowers were not only for him, they were him. Each note resonated with something inside his chest, as though the world outside and the world within had always been one instrument, waiting to be played together. The boy began to hum in return. At first shy, almost inaudible, then stronger, fuller, a thread of sound weaving with the blossoms. His voice was not perfect, it wavered, cracked, but the garden did not care. It welcomed his song, wrapping it in harmony until it felt whole. That was the night he learned. He was not merely a wanderer. He was a singer, not a singer of words, but of feelings, of memories, of dreams. The void listened. The flowers swayed. His sister rested at his side, her glow and his hum becoming one, and in the stillness between notes the boy understood something deep. He had no kingdom, no crown, no grand quest, but he had this, the ability to turn silence into music, emptiness into meaning. Small, quiet, almost invisible, but enough to make the void less lonely, enough to begin. He lay back among the blossoms, their glow soft around him, his hum fading into sleep. The garden sang to him then tenderly, as though rocking him in unseen arms. Its final chord before he drifted away was one of peace, of belonging, of home. And the boy dreamed for the first time not of loss or mystery, but of blooming. Time had always been a mystery to the boy. In the early days, before gardens bloomed or shadows sang, there was only the endless drift of the void. Moments passed like ripples in water, but he never knew where one ended and another began. Yet after the garden of night, he began to feel something shift. His hum had awakened not only the blossoms, but the flow around them. Days did not yet exist, but he felt the weight of change in his body, tiny lengths, delicate threads weaving forward. He asked his sister once, "What is time?" She tilted her head, glowing softly as though considering. Then she held out her hand, and when he took it, she pulled it gently, stretching it between them. The hands drifted apart, a long invisible string of light linking them still. She smiled, and he understood. Time was stretch. It was not the suddenness of a moment, not the crack of beginning or end. It was the space between pulled longer and longer. Time was the stretch that carried laughter into memory, that let sorrow soften into healing. The boy began to notice the stretch everywhere. When he touched a blossom, its note rang out and lingered in the air before fading. That lingering was time. When he dreamed, he floated through images of things long gone, and yet they stayed with him when he woke. That carrying was time. Even silence had length, pauses that wrapped around his breathing. That length was time. The boy realized that time was not a thing he could hold. It was not a stone or a flower. It was not something he could keep in his pocket. It was movement, always moving, always leaving. And yet, like the shadows he had loved, it gave gifts before it went. At first, this made him afraid. If time was always stretching, what if it stretched so far he lost himself? What if it pulled everything away, the garden, his sister, the music? One night, when fear sat heavy in his chest, he spoke aloud to the void. "Please don't take it all from me." His voice cracked. "Don't take her. Don't take this place." The void did not answer with a voice this time. Instead, it gave him a dream. In his dream, he stood by a river, not of water but of light. Its current was slow but steady, carrying sparks like fireflies downstream. Each spark, when he looked closely, was a memory. Some were his own. The first time he saw his sister, the warmth of shadows, the gift of forgetting. Others were not his, images of faces, lands, moments he had never known. The river stretched endlessly. Its flow was calm, patient, unstoppable. A voice drifted from the current, soft as mist. "You cannot stop the river, child. You cannot dam its course, but you can step into it. You can learn to float." He dipped his hands into the stream, feeling the sparks brush his palms like fleeting kisses. Each one left a mark of warmth, a soft echo before slipping away. And though they vanished, he realized something. They were not gone. They had become the current itself. When he woke, his chest felt lighter. He whispered to himself, "Time doesn't take. It carries." From then on, he stopped resisting the stretch. Instead, he leaned into it. He let days, if they could be called days, roll by like waves. He watched his sister glow brighter, then softer, then bright again. He felt himself change, not in leaps, but in subtle stretches. His thoughts deeper, his heart slower, his hum steadier. One evening, lying in the garden, he stretched his arms as wide as he could. "I am time," he whispered. "I am its stretch." His sister laughed silently beside him, mimicking the motion. For a while they simply lay like that, arms wide, bodies open to the void, pretending they could hold eternity. The boy began to treasure the stretches most of all, the stretch between laughter and the quiet after. The stretch between reaching for a flower and hearing it sing. The stretch between one heartbeat and the next. Even sorrow, he found, had its own stretch. When something hurt, it did not vanish instantly, but neither did it last forever. Pain stretched, then softened, then faded, leaving behind only a memory's shape. He thought often of the figure in grey and how it had said, "Everything returns. Everything leaves. Everything matters." And still you go on. Now he understood more deeply. The going on was not a choice of rushing or clinging. It was the acceptance of the stretch. One night, lying awake, the boy whispered to his sister, "Do you think we will last forever?" She blinked, her light pulsing gently. She did not answer with words, only took his hand. And as their fingers laced, he realized it didn't matter. Forever was not the point. The stretch was. For as long as they were stretched together, it was enough. He closed his eyes, sinking into the music of the garden, the breathing of blossoms, the hum of stars unborn. The stretch of time wrapped around him like a blanket, carrying him forward gently, endlessly, and as he drifted toward sleep, he whispered, "I will not fear the stretch. I will live inside it." The void answered not with words but with silence, soft, infinite, patient. The stretch of time continued, and he too continued with it. The boy had learned to move with the stretch of time, to breathe with it, as one breathes with the rise and fall of waves. He had grown used to its patience, its way of carrying everything forward without hurry, without pause. Yet in that patient flow he often wondered who else might share this stretch with him. His sister was constant, her glow beside him like a lantern, but he remembered the shadows he had once loved and lost, remembered the ache of their departures, remembered how the gift of forgetting had softened his sorrow. Still he longed, not for crowds, not for kingdoms, but for another companion, someone new. It happened quietly, as all beginnings did in the void. One evening, while he and his sister lay among the singing blossoms, the boy hummed a soft tune. The flowers answered with their tones, weaving his melody into theirs. But this time something different occurred. A note echoed back, not from any blossom, but from the space between them. The boy sat up, blinking. "Did you hear that?" His sister's light flickered, uncertain. He hummed again, carefully, a low sound in his chest. The blossoms chimed as always, but again between the notes came an echo. A faint, broken voice, as though the void itself was trying to hum back. The boy's heart quickened. He stood, searching the shadows. "Hello?" he whispered. At first there was nothing. Then from the dark, shapes began to gather. Not whole shapes, only fragments. A hand here, a foot there. A curve of a face without its eyes, a whisper of hair without a head to rest upon. The pieces hovered, flickering like shards of glass caught in light. The boy should have felt fear. Yet he did not. Something about the fragments stirred recognition deep in him. They felt it lonely. He held out his hand. "You can come closer." The fragments quivered, uncertain. Then slowly, piece by piece, they drifted toward him. A hand brushed his shoulder, then vanished. A curve of laughter, just the sound, nothing more, drifted by his ear. A pair of eyes blinked once, then dissolved. The boy smiled softly. "You're not broken. You're just not finished." The fragments pulsed faintly at his words, as if they understood. For many stretches, the boy and his sister lingered with the fragments. They never became whole, never formed a single body. Sometimes they gathered into the rough outline of a companion, a figure made of mismatched parts, glowing faintly at the seams. Other times they scattered, drifting around like leaves in a windless sky. But whether gathered or scattered, they were present. They laughed in bits and pieces, half a chuckle here, a hum there, sometimes only the sparkle of an eye or the curl of a smile before it slipped away. The boy learned quickly not to demand wholeness. He did not ask the fragments to stay in one form. He did not cling when they scattered. Instead, he welcomed whatever pieces came, and he cherished them. He whispered once, lying in the garden with a fragment hand resting against his palm, "I think friendship doesn't have to be whole. Even a fragment is enough." His sister watched him quietly, her glow steady as though agreeing. The fragments became a kind of family. They could not speak in full sentences, but sometimes they formed words from echoes. "Stay. Here. Yes. Thank." And the boy, hearing these scattered syllables, felt his chest warm. It was not perfect, but it was real. One night he dreamed of the river again. The sparks flowing by were brighter now, and among them he saw fragments, pieces of people, pieces of places, pieces of laughter, floating in the current. In his dream he reached into the water and held the fragments gently. When he let them go, they drifted back into the stream, not lost, only carried. When he woke, he whispered, "Fragments are not failures. They are beginnings." The void seemed to listen. From that day, he no longer waited for a perfect companion. Instead, he learned to love what arrived. An eye that blinked kindly, a hum that soothed, a curl of hair that brushed his cheek. He found joy in the incompleteness, wonder in the impermanence. Sometimes when he felt lonely, he would call softly into the dark, "My friend, where are you now?" And soon a fragment would float to him, just enough to answer the call. His sister, too, learned to welcome them. She would glow brighter when fragments drew near, her light wrapping around them like warmth. And though she never spoke, The fragments lingered by her side as though drawn to her gentleness. Together, they made a strange family, the boy, the sister of stars, and the fragments of a friend. It was never whole, but it was enough. And in the stretches of time that followed, the boy discovered something deeper. Friendship was not about completeness, it was about presence. Even fragments could make the void less empty. Even pieces could sing. One evening, as the blossoms hummed and the fragments drifted lazily, the boy whispered into the air, "I don't need forever. I don't need perfection. Just a moment. Just a fragment. That is enough for me." The void answered, not with words, but with silence so soft it felt like agreement. The boy lay back among the singing flowers, his sister's hand in his, fragments flickering gently above. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly, feeling the weight of the stretch carry him onward. And as he drifted into dreams, he smiled, because even in pieces friendship had found him. The void was never still for long. Just when the boy thought he had learned all its secrets, it unfolded another wonder, like a dream turning a new page. He had grown used to his sister's glow, the fragments of a friend, the songs of the garden. But one quiet stretch as he walked further into the unknown, the air above him began to shift. At first it was only mist, soft threads curling downward, pale and formless. Yet as he and his sister watched, the mist thickened, gathered, and began to drift in great shapes overhead. Clouds, not like the ones mortals would one day know, tied to skies and storms. These clouds were different. They shimmered faintly, each carrying patterns within their folds, strange symbols, shifting pictures, half-formed stories. The boy tilted his head back in awe. What are they? His sister only smiled gently, as though she had seen them before. She lifted her hand, pointing upward, and as her glow touched the drifting masses, the clouds parted, forming long halls, towering arches, stairways that curved endlessly. The boy gasped. "It's a library." And it was, a library not built from stone or wood, but from endless clouds, soft and luminous. Shelves stretched as far as his eyes could wander, each shelf lined with scrolls and books woven of vapor. Their covers rippled like waves, their pages shimmering with silver ink that shifted constantly, as though alive. He stepped inside with reverence, his bare feet sinking into cloud floor that held him like cotton. A hush filled the space, not silence, but the quiet of endless words waiting to be read. The boy picked up the nearest book. It was cool to the touch, light as breath. When he opened it, no letters greeted him, only a memory, a vision. He saw a woman he did not know, standing on a mountain of stone, singing to the wind. Her song was lonely but proud. The boy felt her ache, her strength, her yearning. And when he closed the book, the vision folded gently back into mist. His hands trembled. These are not stories written. They are stories remembered. The fragments gathered near, fluttering around him. One piece of a face leaned close, as if peering into the book with him. His sister touched his shoulder, grounding him. Together they moved deeper into the library. Every shelf was alive. Every book, every scroll, every roll of mist carried something. A fragment of a dream, a half-forgotten thought, a whisper of a life not yet lived or long since past. The boy opened one, then another, and another still. He saw faces he did not know but somehow loved. He saw kindnesses, small and quiet, that warmed him. He saw sorrows that made his heart ache. The boy whispered, "Who keeps all this?" And for the first time in the library a voice answered, "I do." He turned. An ancient figure drifted from between the shelves. It was vast yet soft, like a giant woven of the clouds themselves. Its face was not fixed, shifting gently between many faces, young and old, kind and stern, male and female, and none at all. Its body was threaded with silver veins, pulsing faintly like light beneath water. The boy stepped closer, bowing his head instinctively. "Are you the keeper?" The figure's ever-shifting face bent toward him. Its voice was like the hush of turning pages. "I am the librarian. I do not write. I do not judge. I only keep every thought, every dream, every fragment that drifts from hearts across time. Here they rest." The boy swallowed. "Why here?" The librarian smiled with many faces. "Because clouds are soft. They do not cling. They carry. And memory, child, must be carried gently." The boy looked down at the book still in his hand. "But are these real people or only dreams?" The librarian's form shimmered. Does it matter? A dream held long enough becomes a story. A story carried long enough becomes a truth. What matters is not what is real, but what is remembered. The boy's heart stirred. He thought of his shadow friends, of the fragments of his sister. He thought of how memory softened with the gift of forgetting, and yet remained. Perhaps they too were written somewhere in these shelves, glowing faintly in a book of clouds. May I read them all? He asked softly. The librarian chuckled, a sound like gentle thunder. You may read as many as you wish, but know this. Every story you read will stay with you. They will become fragments within you. And one day you too will rest on these shelves. The boy's eyes widened. Me? I'll be here too? The librarian nodded, many faces agreeing at once. Everything that is carried becomes part of the library. Nothing is lost, only stored. The boy looked at his sister. Her glow flickered softly as if to reassure him. He held her hand and nodded. Then I want to carry them, so he read. For what felt like stretches beyond stretches, the boy wandered the halls of clouds, opening book after book. Each one filled him with a new fragment. Joy, sorrow, wonder, longing. He learned to cry without fear, to laugh without shame, to ache without breaking. He learned that every story, no matter how small, had weight. The fragments of his friend drifted happily through the shelves, sometimes carrying books, sometimes laughing at visions only they understood. His sister stayed near, her glow lighting every page he opened. The boy began to hum again as he read, and the books hummed back, echoes of the voices within them. Soon the whole library seemed to sing, a chorus of countless lives woven together. And in that song the boy realized he was not alone, not truly. Even if friends left, even if shadows vanished, their fragments were here. Every moment was written, every love remembered, every kindness stored. The librarian approached him once more as he closed a book heavy with sorrow. What have you learned, child? The boy placed his hand on his chest. That even when things break, even when they scatter, they are still here. Nothing is really gone. The librarian's shifting faces smiled. Yes, and so it will be with you. One day your laughter, your songs, your kindness, they will rest here too, carried gently. The boy bowed his head. Then I will live carefully, so my fragments will be worth remembering. The librarian's form faded into mist, leaving only the endless shelves. The boy lay down upon the cloud floor, resting his head on his sister's lap, fragments drifting above him like stars. He breathed slowly, feeling stories hum within his chest. He closed his eyes, knowing that every moment, every stretch of time was already safe, already remembered, already written in the library of clouds. And as he drifted to sleep, the shelves around him whispered lullabies of 1,000 forgotten lives, carrying him gently into dreams. The boy woke from dreams woven of clouds. He stretched, rubbed the soft mist from his eyes, and found the library had dimmed. The shelves glowed faintly, but the great halls no longer hummed with song. His sister sat quietly nearby, her glow subdued as though even she were holding her breath. Something's changed, the boy whispered. And he was right. The air was different, thicker, shadowed. The clouds trembled as if a storm pressed upon them, though no storm came. From the far end of the library, where the shelves bent into endless distance, he felt a presence watching. The librarian was gone. The fragments had drifted to sleep. Even the sister's glow seemed softer. The boy rose slowly, cautious, his bare feet silent on the cloud floor. He walked toward the darkened corner of the library, where stories no longer glowed, where shelves sagged as if weary of their weight. And there, hidden among the dim, he found it, a figure crouched low, clutching itself. Its shape was heavy, enormous, but it trembled like a child in fear. Its skin, or what looked like skin, was stone-gray, cracked yet alive with faint veins of light deep within. Its eyes, when it raised them, burned like coals, but not fiercely, wearily, painfully. The boy gasped. He knew the name without knowing how. Orgalorg. The figure shuddered, its massive shoulders curling inward. A low voice answered, heavy as mountains grinding against one another. You should not know me. The boy stepped closer, though his knees shook. You're hiding here. Yes, the voice rumbled. I am in hiding. From myself, from time, from the memory of what I was. The boy tilted his head, his sister moving close behind him, her glow trying to reach the dim figure but fading at its edges. What were you? The figure exhaled, and the air shivered with sorrow. A guardian. a breaker, a god. Names cling to me, though I never asked for them. Once I walked the stretches openly. I sang louder than mountains. I carried fire heavier than stars. I bent the rivers of time and thought myself kind. His eyes dimmed. But I was not kind. I was terrible. The boy's heart trembled. What did you do? The massive figure lowered its gaze. I shattered things. Not stones, not skies, hearts. I was meant to keep them safe, but I grew proud, restless. I pressed too hard, asked too much. What I touched broke. I could not bear it. So I fled here, where stories soften. I thought perhaps the clouds would forget me. The boy stepped closer, unafraid now. But they haven't. No, Orgalorg said with a voice like distant thunder. The clouds remember everything. I cannot escape myself. The boy looked at his sister. Her glow flickered sadly. He remembered the gift of forgetting, the fragments, the library itself. Nothing was truly lost. Even Orgalog's sorrow was written. The boy whispered, "You're not gone. You're still here. That means you're not finished." The great figure lifted its head slowly, as though the words carried weight. His burning eyes studied the boy. "Not finished?" The boy nodded, placing a hand over his chest. "If you were finished, you'd be only memory. But you're still hiding. That means you still have a choice." The silence that followed was long. The shelves creaked softly. The mist curled and drifted. Then Orgalog's deep breath rolled through the hall. "I have hurt more than I can count," he said. "What choice remains?" The boy swallowed. "To mend." The word hung in the air, small yet steady. Orgalog's vast frame quivered as if struck. His stone-grey skin cracked further, and light began to seep through, faint but alive. He clutched his chest with massive hands, groaning softly, as though a wound long hidden had been touched. "Mend," he repeated. His voice trembled, no longer thunder but weary rain. "I do not know how." The boy moved forward, resting his small hand on one of Orgalog's immense fingers. "Begin small. Carry one story that isn't yours. Hold it gently. Don't break it." Orgalorg stared at him as though the idea were impossible. Yet in the hush of the library, surrounded by endless shelves of stories, something softened. He reached slowly, hesitantly for one book, a faint silver-bound scroll resting nearest him. His hands, once made for breaking, now shook as he touched it. The scroll unfurled, and a memory spilled into the air, a child, laughing while chasing fireflies. So simple, so tender. Orgalog's immense form trembled again, but this time not with shame, with grief, with awe. I never held anything so carefully." The boy smiled faintly. "Then begin here. Let the library teach you." The clouds seemed to hum in agreement. Orgalorg bowed his massive head, cradling the memory close. For a long while the boy stayed with him, his sister's glow steady at his side. The fragments stirred and drifted nearer, curious, unafraid. The air grew lighter. Even the shadows bent softly, as though giving space for Orgalog's sorrow to breathe. The boy sat beside him, listening to his deep voice murmur fragments of the past, failures, regrets, confessions. None were hidden now, and with every story he spoke aloud, the stone cracks along his skin widened, releasing more faint light. It was not brightness, not yet, but it was release. When silence came again, the boy leaned back, tired but steady. He whispered, "You don't have to stay in hiding." Orgalog's burning eyes softened. "Not yet, but perhaps one day. When I can walk without breaking, when my hands learn to carry, not crush. Until then I will remain here, learning, mending," the boy nodded. "That's enough." And so it was. He rose, his sister beside him, fragments gathering once more. He turned back as he walked away, watching the once feared figure now cradling a fragile memory like a lantern in his hands. For the first time, Orgalog's form no longer seemed monstrous, only wounded, only weary, only waiting. The boy whispered to himself as the shelves stretched on. Even the greatest breakers can learn to mend. And in the hush of the Library of Clouds, Orgalorg remained in hiding, not from the world, but from the part of himself that had yet to heal. And that was enough for now. The boy walked on, knowing the story was not ended, only paused, like a book resting half open in the clouds, and somewhere behind him, Orgalog's voice rose softly, not thunder, not stone, but a broken hymn. Beginning again, the Library of Clouds was endless, but not all its shelves carried books. Some paths bent into places stranger still, where stories did not sit neatly bound in ink and parchment, but drifted loose like breath or dream. The boy and his sister walked together, her glow faint but steady, their steps quiet upon the misty ground. They had left Orgalorg behind in his corner of hiding, carrying with them the heaviness of sorrow, but also the soft warmth of knowing even the greatest breaker could learn to hold gently again. The path grew narrower, wrapped in drifting fog. The shelves here thinned, then vanished altogether, until the two of them stood on the edge of what looked like a vast, endless sky. And floating there, unanchored, were the lanterns. They were not made of metal, nor glass, nor wood. Each seemed woven from the same mist as the library itself, but bound into form by faint glimmers of light within. They drifted slowly, some high, some low, each swaying as though rocked by an invisible tide. The boy's eyes widened. "What are they?" His sister tilted her head, glow flickering like a candle. "Stories too fragile for shelves," she whispered. The boy stepped closer. One lantern drifted near, glowing faintly blue. Inside it flickered an image, so faint he almost thought it a trick of the mist. He leaned in, and the light resolved into a small memory, a hand reaching for another, fingers brushing briefly, then separating again. That was all. A fleeting touch. The boy gasped softly. "It's so small." His sister nodded. "Small but not forgotten. These are fragments of care, moments someone once lived, too delicate to become books. They drift here as lanterns, waiting for someone to notice them." The boy reached out a trembling hand. His fingers brushed the mist lantern, and warmth spread through him like the gentle heat of a fire on a cold night. The image inside shimmered, brighter now. The memory glowed stronger, as if grateful to be seen. "It feels alive," the boy whispered. "It is," his sister said. "Every act of care lives longer than the moment it was given. These lanterns hold that light." The boy looked out at the endless drift. There were hundreds, thousands, millions, each one a fragment of kindness, a touch of tenderness, a glance, a word, a breath of compassion. The thought made him dizzy. "How many have been forgotten?" he asked. His sister's glow pulsed gently. "None. They may be lost to the ones who gave them or to the ones who received them, but the library does not forget. The lanterns drift, carrying their quiet weight until someone notices. Then they shine again." The boy felt his chest ache. He thought of all the times he had been held, his sister's hand in his, the shadows whispering, the fragments brushing him like lullabies. Even Orgalorg, trembling in sorrow, had shown care by not fleeing the library altogether, by choosing to stay near its light. He whispered, "We're never as alone as we think." His sister nodded. "Never." For hours, or what might have been hours, they wandered among the lanterns. The boy touched them gently, one by one. Each time he did, he felt a memory breathe, a lullaby hummed by a tired mother, a friend offering half of a piece of bread, a stranger smiling across a crowded place, a child placing a stone on a cairn for someone they had never met. The boy wept softly, not from sadness but from wonder. The world was made of care, more than he had ever known. But as he walked, he noticed something. Some lanterns glowed faint and thin, their light nearly gone. He paused before one, its glow so weak it seemed almost transparent. Inside flickered the faintest trace of a moment, a child laughing alone, no one near enough to hear. His heart ached. "This one is dying." His sister shook her head gently. "Not dying, waiting, it needs to be remembered." The boy touched it, pouring into it all the care he could muster, his memory of laughter, his gratitude for the shadows, his love for his sister. The lantern flickered, then bloomed with sudden brightness, glowing gold instead of pale. He gasped. "I saved it." "You carried it," his sister corrected softly. "That is enough." The boy's chest swelled with something new, not pride, not joy, but a quiet sense of belonging. Care was not only something to receive, it was something to carry, to keep alive, to notice when the world forgot. As he walked further, he began to hum softly. The lanterns swayed to his song, their lights flickering brighter in rhythm. The entire hall of sky seemed to pulse gently with his music, as if he were weaving the lanterns into one great chorus of light. And for the first time, the boy understood why he had been given a voice at all. His hum was not to shape the world. It was to carry its fragile things. The library's mist curled warmly around him as though agreeing. After a time he grew tired. He lay down on a cloud, the lanterns drifting gently overhead. His sister curled beside him, her glow steady and calm. The fragments gathered, floating like quiet stars. The boy whispered half to himself, "Even the smallest moment matters. Even the smallest light lasts." And the lanterns swayed, glowing gently, carrying that truth into the silence. The boy closed his eyes. He felt the stretch of time wrap around him, the glow of lanterns above him, the warmth of care carrying him. He sank deeper, breathing softer, and in the quiet, the library seemed to hum back, a lullaby woven of 1,000 small lights, each one a memory of care. The lanterns drifted behind him, their light softening into memory, and the boy walked once more with his sister at his side. The path curled upward through the library's endless sky, until shelves appeared again, though these were not the grand shelves of books or scrolls, nor the drifting aisles of glowing fragments. These shelves were crooked, narrow, and made of something that looked like wood, but breathed like mist. The boy frowned. "This doesn't look like the other places." His sister's glow flickered as though she too felt the strangeness. "It is quieter here," she whispered, and it was. Even silence had sound in the library, the hush of pages turning, the hum of drifting clouds, the faint music of lanterns. But here the quiet was heavy, still, almost secret. The boy stepped carefully. The shelves sagged beneath small objects, none larger than his palm. Broken buttons, chipped cups, snapped twigs, half a feather, a doll's cracked bead, a scrap of paper with only one word left unreadable. Each thing looked ordinary, almost meaningless, and yet the boy felt something stir in him as he passed them. "These are leftovers," he said softly. "Not leftovers," answered a new voice, warm and low, like water running over stones. "They are beginnings." The boy turned quickly. From between the shelves emerged a figure unlike any he had yet seen. It was neither tall nor small, but shaped like a bundle of robes stitched from patchwork cloth, every fold lined with stitches of silver thread. Where its face should have been was only a circle of pale light, faint but kind. It carried in its arms a small box, no bigger than a child's toy chest. From it pieces spilled, marbles, shards, threads of twine, coins worn smooth by touch. The figure bent and placed each gently on the shelves, one by one, as if arranging treasures. The boy whispered, "Who are you?" "I am the keeper of small things," the figure said. "The one who remembers what the world overlooks." The boy stared at the shelves, then back at the keeper. "Why hold these broken things?" "They don't seem important." The keeper's pale face light flickered gently. "Because nothing is unimportant." A cracked bead once rested against a child's skin as she dreamed. A feather once carried the air beneath a bird's wing. A button once held a coat closed on a long winter night. Each thing is a story, even when forgotten. The boy stepped closer, touching one of the small objects, a stone polished smooth on one side, jagged on the other. At once he felt a memory flicker, a hand skipping the stone across water, laughter following the ripples. The vision was quick, but it left warmth in his chest. He gasped softly. "Even the smallest thing remembers." The keeper nodded. "Yes, and when no one remembers, I do. I keep them here, not so they can be worshipped, not so they can be weighed, but so they can rest. Care is not always grand. Often it is small. To hold something others cast aside, that is also love." The boy thought of the lanterns glowing with small acts of kindness. Now here were objects, fragile and discarded, still carrying weight. He realized care was not always light. It could be material, rough, chipped, broken, and still it mattered. "Do you fix them?" he asked softly. The keeper shook its robed head. "No, to fix would be to erase their truth. They are not meant to be perfect again. They are meant to be held as they are." The boy's sister glowed a little brighter, stepping closer to one shelf. She lingered near a tiny scrap of fabric, faded, frayed. She touched it lightly, and for a moment her glow pulsed with sorrow, then with tenderness. She whispered nothing, but the boy understood. Even she carried fragments too fragile to share. The keeper set its box down gently, resting long sleeves over it. "Do you carry anything broken, child?" The boy blinked. His thoughts wandered. He thought of the shadows he had loved but lost. He thought of the figure in grey who had vanished. He thought of his fear of time's stretch, his sorrow at his sister's dimming glow, his ache for Orgalorg's pain. "Yes," he whispered. "I carry many." The keeper inclined its faceless head. "Then place one here, not to forget it, but to let it rest." The boy hesitated, then reached into his chest, not with hands, but with thought. He pulled free the ache he had carried since first leaving the shadows, the sorrow of their absence. It shivered in his palm like a tiny shard of glass, glowing faintly. He placed it carefully on a shelf. The glass shimmered once, then stilled. The shelf sighed softly as though grateful for its weight. The boy felt lighter. Not healed, but gentler inside, as if his sorrow had been given somewhere safe to stay. The keeper's voice flowed like water again. This is care also. To keep safe what is fragile, not hidden inside you where it festers, but placed somewhere it can breathe. The boy bowed his head. Thank you. The keeper gathered its box again, rising slowly. No thanks are needed. Only gentleness. That is the cycle of care. What is broken need not be discarded. It can be carried, cradled, remembered. The boy watched as the keeper drifted away between shelves, robes trailing softly, pale face light fading into mist. He lingered a while longer with his sister. They touched a few more small things, buttons, shells, ribbons, each carrying faint warmth, and let them rest again. When they left, the boy whispered, I never knew care could be so small. His sister's glow pulsed softly. Small things are often the strongest. They last longer than we think. And with that they stepped out of the crooked shelves, back into the library's endless drift. The boy's chest felt lighter, his heart quieter. He had left something broken behind, but not forgotten. And that was enough. The boy noticed it first, not in her steps, not in her voice, but in her glow. His sister had always walked beside him like a lantern of her own, a steady radiance that warmed the mist and made the shelves gentler to look at. But as they drifted deeper into the library, he saw her light flicker. It wasn't sudden or sharp. It was subtle, the way a candle bends its flame when a breath crosses it. He told himself it was nothing. Just the haze, just the shadows playing tricks. But as days, or what might have been days, stretched on, he could not deny it. Her glow was dimming. One evening, as they rested near a shelf of folded dreams, the boy leaned close and whispered, Are you tired? She looked at him, her face lit faint as moonlight, and smiled. But even her smile seemed softer than before, less certain. I'm always a little tired, she said. That is the nature of glow. It must fade so it can return. The boy frowned. Return? But what if it doesn't? Her hand brushed his, cool and kind. Then I will have shone enough. The boy's chest ached. He wanted to argue, to tell her she must not fade, that he needed her light. But the words stuck in his throat. To demand she shine forever felt cruel, as though he would keep her glowing only for himself, so he stayed silent and simply held her hand. In the days that followed, he became watchful. Every flicker of her glow made him nervous. Every dim stretch made him afraid. He tried to speak more often, to make her laugh, to hum tunes that might brighten her. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. At night he lay awake while she rested. He would stare at her glow, measuring it against the mist, whispering to himself, Don't fade. Please don't fade. And yet, as he watched, he began to notice something else. Her glow was not gone. It was changing. When she dimmed, the light did not vanish. It slipped outward, folding into the shelves, into the mist, into the very fabric of the library. The books shimmered softer when she passed. The lanterns swayed more gently. Even the keeper's crooked shelves seemed warmer. Her glow was becoming part of everything. The boy did not know whether to feel comfort or grief. One day, as they sat beside the drifting fragments, he asked her, Do you know why you're fading? She looked at him for a long time, then answered with the quiet honesty she always carried, Because I was never meant to last unchanged. I was born to guide you here, to walk with you through beginnings. But care does not cling. It lets go, and I may need to let go too. The boy's throat tightened. But I don't want you to go. Her glow pulsed gently like a hand squeezing his. I know, but you must learn to carry light on your own, even without me beside you. He shook his head, tears pressing at his eyes. I can't, I don't know how. She smiled faintly, leaning her head to his shoulder. You already do. When you touched the lanterns, they brightened. When you gave your sorrow to the keeper, it rested. When you sat with Orgalorg, he began to mend. You have carried light every step. The boy blinked. He hadn't thought of it that way. He had only been following what felt right, what felt kind. Could that really be enough to carry her glow forward? He didn't answer, but he held her closer, listening to her slow breathing, feeling her warmth settle against him. The days stretched again, and the fading deepened. There were moments now when her glow was so faint she looked almost transparent. The boy's fear grew sharper, though he tried not to show it. One evening, unable to keep his silence, he cried out softly, "Please don't leave me. I don't know if I can walk without you." His sister turned to him, her glow no brighter than a sliver of dawn. Yet her eyes held such tenderness that he felt both broken and healed at once. "You can," she whispered. "Because my glow was never mine alone. It was always ours. Every step we took together, every story we touched, it lives in you now. When I fade, I do not end. I continue in what you remember, in how you carry me forward." Her words settled in him like seeds. Painful but steady, the boy wept quietly, his tears slipping into the mist. His sister did not stop him, nor did she try to soothe the sorrow away. She simply held him, letting him feel what he felt. That too was care. One night, as he drifted half asleep, the boy dreamed. In his dream, his sister was no longer beside him. He stood alone in a hall of shelves, his hands empty, the mist silent. Fear struck him, but then he saw it, his glow. It was faint, fragile, but real. A soft light rising from his chest, wrapping gently around him. It was not as bright as hers, but it was enough to see by, enough to walk forward. When he woke, she was still beside him, her glow thin but smiling. He told her the dream, and she pressed her cool hand to his chest. "That is the truth," she whispered. "Even if I fade, your light will stretch on, and somewhere I will still be with you." The boy closed his eyes, resting his head against her shoulder. He still feared the fading. He still wished she could shine forever. But beneath the ache, he felt something steadier now, like the stretch of time itself carrying him forward. And so the boy walked on, his sister beside him, her glow dimming, his own beginning to rise. Neither bright, neither perfect, but both enough. The library held them softly, as if cradling this moment of change. And in the quiet hum of mist and shelves, the boy learned another truth of care. To care is not to keep forever. To care is to stay present, even as things change. And though he did not yet know how the story would unfold, he whispered to himself, "I will carry her glow, always." The fragments began to stir before the boy noticed them. They had always drifted at the edges of the library, glimmering shards of story, each carrying a trace of memory. Some were bright, some dull, some cracked. They had floated for so long that the boy assumed they belonged only to the shelves and the keeper, not to him. But one evening, as he sat beside his fading sister, a fragment brushed against his shoulder. He looked up in surprise. The shard pulsed faintly, a rhythm like a heartbeat. And in its glow, he saw a vision. His own laughter years ago as he and his sister skipped stones across a river that no longer existed. The stone had skipped 3 times before sinking, and his sister had clapped her hands, her glow bright and wild. The boy's breath caught. He reached for the fragment, but before he could touch it, it slipped into the mist. He turned to his sister. "Did you see that?" She nodded softly. "The fragments remember us too." Over the next days, more fragments drifted near. They no longer hovered distant, but circled slowly as if drawn to him. Each time one brushed past, it revealed something small, a quiet moment of kindness, a shared smile, a gentle word. One fragment showed the boy himself kneeling in the shelves, comforting Orgalorg when his sorrow spilled. Another showed him handing a lantern to a traveler who had lost their way. Another showed his sister humming to him as he cried on a night he could barely remember. The boy realized then that the fragments were not random. They were echoes of care, returning to him in pieces, like a story being reassembled. One night, a cluster of fragments floated around him, circling like patient fireflies. He reached out his hands, trembling, and one by one they pressed gently into his palms. When the first touched him, he felt warmth surge through his chest, not sharp, not overwhelming, but steady. The warmth lingered even after the shard dissolved into him. The second fragment brought with it a sound, his sister's laughter, carried faintly as though down a hallway. The third brought the scent of bread, reminding him of mornings in a world that had burned away long ago. Each fragment left something behind, not just memory but feeling, comfort, connection, continuity. His sister, watching, smiled faintly. "Do you see? Your glow is not only your own. It is woven from every piece of care given, every kindness shared. The fragments remember so you can carry them forward. The boy's eyes shimmered. But why are they returning now? Because you are ready, she whispered. Because you have learned that to hold light is not to cling, but to let it flow through you. The fragments know when to return. The boy began to look forward to the fragments each day. He sat in the mist, open-palmed, and let them drift into him. Each arrival was small, simple, unremarkable to anyone else. But to him, each was a miracle. One fragment showed a moment he had forgotten, giving half of his sandwich to a lonely child. Another showed the way he had once listened without interruption to an old wanderer's story. Another carried only a phrase, whispered by someone he barely remembered. "Thank you for staying." The boy realized that his life, though quiet and strange, had been filled with fragments of care. Some he had thought insignificant, some he had forgotten entirely. But the library remembered, and now it gave them back to him. One evening, as he gathered fragments, the boy felt a sudden weight settle over him. He looked down and saw a shard larger than any he had held before. It pulsed with a deep, sorrowful glow. When it touched him, he gasped. It was the memory of the night he had lost everything. The fire, the voices, the ash. He saw himself as a child clutching his sister's hand, their glow faint against the burning sky. He felt the same grief, the same helplessness, the same hollow ache that had followed him ever since. The boy dropped the shard, his hands trembling. Tears blurred his vision. Why would it give me this? His sister touched his shoulder. Her glow was faint now, but her hand steady. Because fragments are not only joy, they are truth. To carry your glow forward, you must hold all of it. The laughter, the kindness, and the sorrow. The boy shook his head. It's too heavy. I don't want to remember. She leaned closer, her voice soft. Then let me hold it with you. Together they placed their hands on the fragment. The memory rose again, sharp and aching, but this time it was softened by her presence. They stood in the fire together, not alone. They wept together, not apart. And when the shard dissolved into him, the ache remained, but steadier, less jagged. Not just a wound, but a part of his story. The fragments continued to return, some joyful, some painful. The boy learned to receive them all. Each one shaped his glow, layering it with colors he could not have imagined before. Some days he shone warm and golden. Some days he shimmered pale and fragile. But always he glowed, and with each fragment he noticed his sister's fading slow. Her light was still dim, but steadier now, as if the library itself had lent her a little strength. Perhaps his growing glow was helping her hold on. One night, as they lay side by side, the boy whispered, "Do you think I'll ever have all the fragments?" His sister smiled faintly. "No one ever has them all, but you will gather enough. Enough to keep walking. Enough to remind others that their fragments matter too." The boy closed his eyes, her words echoing through him like lullabies. Enough. He did not need to be whole. He only needed to keep walking, carrying what returned. And so the fragments came night after night until the boy began to notice something new. His glow no longer belonged only to him. When he walked near the shelves, the lanterns leaned toward him. When he passed travelers, they seemed calmer. Even Orgalorg, still mending, lifted his head more often, watching the boy with a kind of quiet trust. The boy realized that just as the fragments had returned to him, his glow now spilled outward, leaving traces in others. Someday, perhaps, they too would gather fragments of him. The thought made him smile, even through his lingering sorrow. The fragments did not end his sister's fading. They did not erase his fears. But they taught him this. Care does not disappear. It drifts, it scatters, and in time it returns, not as it was, but as something new, carried forward by those who remember. And as he drifted into sleep beside his sister that night, the boy whispered to himself, "I will keep gathering. I will keep carrying. Even when I am afraid." The library's mist stirred softly, as though it had heard, and the fragments glowed faint around them, like stars that had chosen to return. Silence arrived slowly, as it always does. At first, the boy thought it was only the ordinary quiet of the library, the hush of mist, the gentle settling of shelves, the soft hum that had always lulled him into rest. But then he noticed something different. The fragments no longer stirred. The lanterns no longer swayed. Even his sister's glow, faint as it had become, seemed suspended in stillness. The library was not only quiet, it was holding its breath. The boy shifted uneasily. He had learned to find comfort in sound, The scrape of a shelf, the rustle of a page, the faint echo of his sister humming. But now as he listened, he felt the silence press against him, heavy and vast. He whispered her name. She did not answer. Not because she was gone, but because even her voice seemed caught in the stillness. She sat beside him, her dim light steady, her eyes tender, but she too seemed to feel the weight of it. The boy's chest tightened. He had never known silence could weigh this much. At first he tried to break it. He hummed songs, tapped the shelves, spoke stories aloud, but each sound he made fell flat, swallowed by the mist before it could echo. The library gave nothing back. The boy grew frustrated. "Why won't it answer me?" he muttered, his voice trembling. His sister touched his hand gently. "Not all silence is absence. Sometimes silence is listening." Her words confused him. "Listening to what?" "To you," she said simply. The boy blinked. The thought unsettled him, that the silence itself might be listening, that his words were not vanishing but being held, shifted something inside him. He grew quiet, unsure what to say. The longer the silence stretched, the more it revealed. In the absence of sound, the boy began to notice things he had overlooked: the steady rhythm of his breathing, the faint pulse of his glow, the way his sister's light leaned toward him even as it dimmed. He felt his heartbeat as though for the first time, slow and insistent, like a drum beneath the stillness. But with these new discoveries came memories he had long tried to keep buried. The silence carried them up, one by one, like stones rising from the riverbed. He remembered the loneliness of nights after the fire. He remembered the times he had begged for help and none had come. He remembered words he had spoken in anger, words that had left others in tears. The silence held them all, without judgment, without reply. It was not cruel, but it was unyielding. The boy wept softly. His tears made no sound as they fell, yet the silence absorbed them too, as though cradling even his sorrow. His sister leaned against him, her glow faint but steady. She did not try to fill the silence with words. She let it weigh on them both. At last she whispered, "Silence is not here to punish you. It is here to remind you that even when the world stops speaking, you still exist. Your glow still burns. Your breath still moves." The boy pressed his forehead against his knees. "But it hurts." "It feels too heavy," she nodded. "That is the weight of being seen fully. Silence sees everything. It does not turn away. And sometimes that feels unbearable. But sometimes it is what we need." The boy sat with this truth. He sat until the ache softened, until the silence no longer felt like a wall, but like a hand, steady on his shoulder. He began to notice how silence gave space for his sister's fading glow to be what it was, without forcing brightness. How silence gave Orgalorg room to mend, without pressure to speak of his pain. How silence allowed fragments to drift without rushing their return. Perhaps, the boy thought, silence was not emptiness at all. Perhaps it was a form of care, one that did not speak but stayed. One night, as the silence weighed deepest, the boy lay awake and asked softly, "What if I fade too? What if one day my glow is gone and no one remembers me?" The silence did not answer, but it did not abandon him either. Instead, it wrapped him in stillness so complete that he felt for a moment eternal. He felt as though his breath joined the mist, his glow joined the shelves, his memories joined the fragments. He felt that even if he faded, he would not vanish. He would be carried. Tears slipped down his cheeks, not from fear this time, but from a strange peace. When he woke, the silence was lighter. The fragments had begun to stir again, faintly, like stars at the edge of dawn. His sister's glow flickered softly beside him. The library breathed once more. He turned to her, whispering, "The silence. It didn't leave me." She smiled faintly. "Silence never leaves. It only waits, and when it returns, you will know how to listen." The boy nodded slowly. For the first time, he felt he could carry silence without fear. Not as weight, but as reminder, that even when all sound falls away, he remains, that his glow, however faint, is enough. From then on, the boy no longer filled every quiet moment with words. He learned to sit in silence with his sister, with Orgalorg, with the fragments. He learned to listen not only to voices, but to breath, to presence, to the hum of care that existed even when unspoken. And though the silence still returned, heavy at times, he no longer resisted it. He let it weigh on him, let it show him the truths he had tried to hide. And each time he found he could carry a little more. The boy began to understand. Silence is not absence. Silence is a mirror, and to sit with it is to see yourself whole, fragments, sorrow, glow, and all. He carried this lesson quietly, as though tucking it into his chest, for he knew there would come a day when the silence would return heavier than ever, when his sister's glow dimmed to nothing. And when that day came, he wanted to be ready. For now, he leaned against her, breathing in the stillness, letting it cradle them both. And the library, vast and endless, held the silence like a lullaby. The library was endless, yet not always the same. Some days its shelves curved like rivers, winding deeper than the eye could follow. Other days, the mist thinned to reveal windows that opened into starfields. The boy had grown used to its shifting nature. But nothing prepared him for the night he stepped through a corridor of lanterns and found himself looking upward into a garden that floated in the sky. It was not like the gardens of earth, with soil and stones and familiar trees. This one hung suspended in the air, its roots tangled in nothing, its branches swaying as if watered by clouds. Flowers drifted, their petals weightless as though they had learned to grow in dreamlight instead of rain. The boy gasped softly. His sister, faint beside him, whispered, "Do you see how care plants itself even where no ground exists?" They climbed slowly, though there was no ladder, no stair. The mist itself seemed to lift them, cradling their steps as though the library wanted them to see this place. When the boy touched the first branch, a shiver ran through him. The leaves glowed faintly, each one carrying a memory, not his own this time, but fragments of others. A mother's lullaby, a child's laugh, a friend's last farewell. The garden shimmered with care that had been sown across time, rising upward like roots searching for light. His sister smiled weakly. This is where forgotten kindness grows. Not lost, only lifted, the boy pressed his hand to the leaves. They were cool yet comforting, like the pages of a beloved book. Why would kindness need to be lifted? Because sometimes the ground cannot hold it, she murmured. Sometimes it belongs higher, where no sorrow can trample it. They wandered deeper into the floating grove. Flowers bloomed in shapes the boy had never seen. Petals like stars, stems like glass, blossoms that hummed when brushed. Some flowers bent toward him, opening as if to greet his glow. He bent to smell one, expecting fragrance, but instead he heard a voice. A quiet memory whispered, "You mattered more than I told you." The boy drew back, stunned. He touched another bloom. "Thank you for waiting when I could not speak." Another. "I still carry your warmth." Tears blurred his eyes. "These are—" He faltered. His sister nodded. "Yes, care that was never spoken, gratitude that was never given. It still lives, even when words are left unsaid." The boy pressed his hand to his chest. A deep ache rose in him, not of sorrow but of tenderness too large to hold. At the center of the garden stood a tree unlike any other. Its trunk was wide as silence, its branches stretched across the sky. And from those branches hung lanterns not lit by fire, but by blossoms glowing from within. The boy reached for one lantern, and it opened like a flower. Inside he saw himself, years younger, sitting alone after the fire, clutching his knees, believing no one saw him. But as he watched, the glow brightened, and another image appeared. His sister sitting a little ways behind him, her glow faint but present, keeping watch while he wept. The boy's throat tightened. "I didn't know. I thought I was alone." His sister leaned against the tree, her eyes tender. Care is often unseen, but it is never wasted. They rested beneath the great tree, listening to the hum of blossoms. The boy felt lighter here, as though the garden had taken some of the weight he carried. After a long silence, he whispered, "Do you think, when you fade, your glow will come here?" She looked upward, her dim light reflected in the petals above. "Perhaps, or perhaps it will scatter into fragments, waiting for you to gather. Or perhaps it will join your glow, so faint you cannot tell it apart. Care never chooses only one form." The boy held her hand tightly. "I don't want to only find you in blossoms." She squeezed back, her touch cool but steady. "Then remember me in your breath, in your glow, in your silence. The blossoms will only remind you of what is already yours." As they prepared to leave the garden, the boy felt a strange impulse. He searched the mist, then knelt, cupping his hands. He thought of every kindness he had received, the lanterns, the keeper's patience, Orgalorg's trust, his sister's endless care. He thought of them and let his glow pulse outward, warm and soft. When he opened his hands, a small seed lay in his palms. He blinked, startled. "Did I make this?" His sister smiled faintly. "You planted it without even knowing." The boy placed the seed at the base of the great tree. It sank into the mist, and at once a small sprout rose, trembling but alive. He felt something bloom in him too, the understanding that care was not only to be received, but given back, that every act, however small, was a seed, and someday perhaps it would rise into the sky. As they descended, the boy looked back. The garden shimmered above them, blossoms swaying, lanterns glowing, seeds waiting. He whispered to himself, "I will plant wherever I can." The library stirred gently, as though approving, and his sister, though dim, leaned against him, her faint glow steady as dawn. That night, as he drifted into sleep, the boy dreamed not of fire or loss, but of gardens. He dreamed of petals that whispered gratitude, of trees that cradled memories, of seeds rising higher than sorrow could reach. And when he woke, the dream still lingered, like fragrance in the air. The boy carried this truth with him from then on. Care is a garden in the sky. It does not need ground to grow. It rises always toward light. And even when words go unspoken, even when glows fade, the blossoms remain. The boy did not notice it at first, because patience rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, like a leaf drifting to the ground, or like a ripple that widens long after the stone has sunk. In the days after the garden in the sky, the library grew still again, not heavy with silence this time, but calm, unhurried. The shelves shifted more slowly. The mist curled in long, languid swirls. Even the fragments drifted at a pace that seemed designed to remind him that there was no need to rush. At first, the boy fidgeted. He had grown used to moments of revelation, the keeper's riddles, Orgalorg's sorrow, the blossoms of forgotten kindness. Now there was nothing but waiting. He tapped his feet, wandered aisles, pulled books that refused to open. Each attempt left him more restless. Finally, his sister, glowing faint as a dying ember, whispered, "Why do you chase what will come when it is ready?" The boy flushed. "Because I don't know how to wait." "What if nothing comes at all?" She gave a tired but tender smile. "Then waiting itself is the gift." The words puzzled him. Waiting felt empty. It felt like wasted time, like standing in shadows while the world moved elsewhere. But his sister had rarely been wrong. So, despite his unease, he tried to listen to the waiting. He slowed his steps. He sat with Orgalorg without asking questions. He lingered near shelves without tugging at their secrets. And slowly he began to notice something. The library seemed different when he stopped reaching. The mist curled around him like a blanket instead of a barrier. The shelves hummed faintly, as though relieved not to be tugged at. Even the fragments, when left alone, drifted nearer on their own. Perhaps, the boy thought, patience was not absence, but trust. One evening, he sat with his sister near a crooked shelf, both of them quiet. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed without change. His restlessness rose again, hot and prickly. He wanted to shake her, to demand she speak, to fill the stillness with anything. But then he looked at her glow. It was faint, weaker than ever, yet still steady. She had been fading for so long, yet she did not fight or rush it. She sat, patient with her own dimming, as though trusting that even this slow vanishing had its place. The boy felt something soften in him. He leaned against her shoulder, his glow flickering. "How do you do it? How do you wait without breaking?" Her voice was no more than a breath, because waiting is not nothing. It is care stretched over time. Each moment I sit with you is a gift, even if it feels small. One day you will see. The boy began to test this truth. He waited with fragments, holding his hands open until one chose to come. He waited with Orgalorg, who sometimes sat silent for hours before speaking a single word. He waited with himself, sitting through the ache in his chest instead of fleeing it. It was not easy. Sometimes he grew impatient, sometimes he doubted. But in those moments he remembered the garden, how seeds did not bloom at once, how blossoms opened only when ready. And he whispered to himself, patience is a garden too. One night a fragment drifted to him after a long, quiet stretch. It was small, almost unnoticeable, but when it touched him, it showed a memory he had long forgotten. His sister years ago teaching him to tie a knot in silence. She had not spoken, only guided his hands again and again, until they found the rhythm. At the time, he had been frustrated, impatient with his clumsy fingers. But now, watching the memory unfold, he saw her gift clearly. She had been patient with him, and in that patience he had learned not just the knot, but the rhythm of care itself. The fragment dissolved into him, and he whispered, "Patience is—" Love stretched thin but unbroken. His sister, hearing him, smiled faintly. The library seemed to reward his waiting. Shelves revealed passages not when pulled, but when left alone long enough. The mist parted on its own, unveiling new corridors when he no longer demanded them. Even Orgalorg began to speak more, not hurriedly but with words that carried depth, as though the boy's patient listening had opened a door. The boy realized then that patience was not only waiting for others, it was waiting with them. Our shared stillness, a gentle companionship that said, "I will not leave, even if nothing happens." One night, as they rested, his sister leaned close. "There will come a day when my glow is gone. You will ache, and you will want to rush that ache away. But if you can be patient with your sorrow, if you can wait with it instead of fleeing, it will change. It will soften. It will teach you." The boy's throat tightened. "But I don't want to wait through losing you." Her hand brushed his. "You already are." He closed his eyes, tears slipping free. She was right. Every day she faded a little more, and every day he learned to sit with it. To hold her hand without knowing how many more times he would get to. To treasure her glow while it lasted, instead of demanding it shine brighter. This too was patience. The hardest gift, but the truest. From then on, the boy carried patience as if it were a seed in his chest. Whenever restlessness clawed at him, whenever silence felt too heavy, whenever sorrow pressed too sharp, he whispered, "Wait, trust." Care stretched over time, and slowly, waiting became less of a burden and more of a blessing. It gave space for fragments to return. It gave breath for sorrow to soften. It gave his sister room to fade, not as a tragedy but as part of their shared story. The boy began to understand. Patience is not weakness. It is the strongest form of care. It is choosing to stay, even when nothing blooms yet. And as he rested that night, listening to the rhythm of his own breath, he whispered to the library, to his sister, to himself, "I will wait, for as long as it takes, and in waiting I will love." The library stirred softly like a slow nod. His sister's glow flickered, then steadied, and the boy closed his eyes, carrying the gift of patience into his dreams. The first sound was not a song at all, but a trembling note that cracked in the middle, like a voice unsure of itself. It echoed faintly through the library, fragile and wavering as though afraid to be heard. The boy paused in his wandering, head tilting toward the sound. He had never heard music here before. The library of clouds breathed with whispers, with turning pages, with the hush of mist, but never melody. And so he followed it, cautious yet curious, drawn like a moth to a flickering flame. The sound led him through narrow aisles, past crooked shelves and drifting fragments, until he found a space unlike any other. The mist thinned here, revealing a wide clearing. In the center stood a broken harp, strings frayed, frame cracked. A dim fragment of light hovered above it, pulsing weakly in rhythm with the sound. The boy stepped closer. The harp quivered on its own, plucking broken notes as though remembering a song but failing to sing it whole. He whispered, "What are you?" The fragment flickered, and a voice, faint as a sigh, answered, a hymn once sung, now fractured. The boy sat cross-legged before the harp, listening. The notes faltered, fell silent, then rose again, stumbling but determined. There was sorrow in the sound, yes, but also yearning. It was like hearing someone try to remember how to breathe after too much silence. His sister appeared beside him, her glow dimmer than ever. She listened too, head bowed. "It is not broken," she murmured. "It is becoming," the boy frowned. "But it hurts to hear." "Yes," she said gently. "All growth carries a note of hurt. Even songs must break to be sung anew." The boy stayed, listening for hours. The harp never formed a full melody, never resolved into beauty, and yet the longer he listened, the more he felt something stir within him. The broken notes echoed the ache in his chest, the waiting, the loss, the fear. The song seemed to tell him, "I am unfinished, and so are you. That does not mean we are without worth." One night Orgalorg shuffled into the clearing. The old watcher gazed at the harp with eyes like black mirrors. "Ah," he rumbled, voice low, "the broken hymn, I thought it gone. You know it?" the boy asked. Orgalorg nodded slowly. "It was once whole. Long ago, before the War of the Skies, before even my fall, it sang of unity. Its music bound wanderers together. But then came the fracture and the song splintered. Now it struggles to remember itself." The boy's heart ached. "Can it be healed?" Orgalorg did not answer. He simply knelt, placed a massive claw on the cracked frame and bowed his head. Silence followed, deep and heavy. Then softly he whispered, "Perhaps, but not by mending. Only by learning to love its brokenness," the boy tried. He placed his hands on the harp and closed his eyes. He did not try to force the strings into melody. Instead, he breathed with the sound, let his glow flicker in rhythm with its halting notes. To his surprise, the harp seemed to soften. Its strings still faltered, but the stumbles grew gentler, more tender, as though comforted by his listening. His sister hummed faintly beside him, not a full song, just a single tone. It wove itself between the harp's brokenness, filling the gaps with quiet warmth. The boy followed her lead, humming too. Their voices did not perfect the hymn, but they kept it company, and that perhaps was enough. Days passed. The boy returned often, sitting with the harp. He no longer grew frustrated when its notes cracked. Instead, he let the broken song remind him that imperfection was not failure, that even a fractured melody could carry meaning, could touch the heart more deeply than a polished one. One evening, as he sat listening, a fragment drifted into his hands. It pulsed faintly, then unfolded into memory. He saw himself as a child years ago, singing nonsense songs to his sister. His voice had cracked, his rhythm faltered, yet she had clapped and laughed and told him it was beautiful. Not because it was flawless, but because it was his. The boy blinked back tears. He looked at the harp and whispered, "You are beautiful too. Not because you are whole, but because you are still singing." The harp trembled, strings glowing faintly as though grateful. The boy began to notice echoes of the broken hymn elsewhere. In Orgalorg's pauses, when words stuck in his throat. In his sister's fading glow, bright one moment, dim the next. In his own restlessness, his half-formed thoughts, his stumbling prayers to stars he barely believed in. Everything, it seemed, carried a broken hymn within it. Yet each fracture was also a note of its own. And together, they formed a song too wide, too soft, too mysterious to be understood fully. One night, as the boy drifted towards sleep beside the harp, his sister leaned close and whispered, "Do you hear it?" "Hear what?" he asked, groggy, the way the silence cradles the sound. "The hymn is broken, yes, but silence does not mind. It gathers the fragments, holds them gently, and lets them be. That is love too." The boy listened again, and for the first time he noticed that the harp's cracked notes were not alone. They were carried by silence, soft, wide, infinite. The silence did not fix them, but it gave them a place to belong. Tears slid down his cheeks. He held his sister's hand, her glow faint against his palm, and whispered, "I think I understand. Even broken songs can be sung. And maybe broken love is still love." Her glow flickered once like a nod. That night the boy dreamed of standing beneath a vast sky. Stars flickered above him, constellations shifting like scattered notes. And from somewhere beyond he heard the broken hymn, not whole, not polished, but carried by the stars themselves. Each flicker was a note, fractured yet luminous, forming a melody too vast to comprehend. He woke with a peace he could not explain. From then on, he carried the hymn with him. Whenever doubt weighed heavy, whenever sorrow cracked his voice, whenever silence felt too wide, he whispered, "Even broken songs are still songs," and the library seemed to hum in agreement, the shelves shifting more gently, the mist curling like a lullaby around him. The harp never fully healed. Its song never became whole. But perhaps that was never the point. Perhaps the gift was this, to learn that brokenness could still be sung. And so the boy walked on, the broken hymn echoing softly in his heart, teaching him that imperfection was not the end of beauty, but often the beginning of it. The boy had begun to notice patterns, not just in the drifting of fragments or the shuffling of shelves, but in the very way life moved around him. Things returned, things repeated. Yet each return was never quite the same. It was as if the library breathed in circles, circles that closed, and circles that opened. One morning, though here, mornings and nights were indistinguishable, He found himself walking back to the clearing of the broken harp. The song still trembled, still fractured, yet it no longer struck him as sorrowful. It felt instead like a circle half drawn, a melody that did not need an ending to have meaning. He sat before it and whispered, "You remind me that nothing is finished. Even endings bend into beginnings." The harp gave a faint sighing note as though in agreement. Later he wandered to the place where he and his sister once built a nest of drifting fragments. It was gone now, dissolved back into the mist. Yet standing there, he felt the memory wrap around him like a shawl. They had laughed here, whispered here, rested here. The nest was gone, but the warmth of it lingered. His sister drifted beside him, her glow barely a whisper of light. She traced her hand in the air, forming a circle with her finger. "See? What was once open closes. And what closes opens again," the boy frowned. "But isn't closing the same as losing?" She shook her head gently. "Not always. A circle closes to hold something safe, and then it opens to let it change," he tried to understand. He looked at her glow, at its flicker, and realized even her fading was a kind of circle. A bright beginning, a long middle, and now slowly, softly, her closing. But perhaps when her light was gone, another opening would follow. The thought hurt. Yet it also comforted him. That night Orgalorg appeared, his wings folded like heavy curtains. He sat beside the boy in silence until at last he said, "Do you know why I linger here, child?" The boy shook his head. "Because I am trapped in circles," Orgalorg sighed. "Once I rose. Once I fell. Now I circle my own shame again and again, unable to leave it behind." The boy's heart tightened. "But circles don't always mean traps. Some circles are paths. They return you to yourself, but with something new each time." Orgalorg's eyes glinted. "You think my circle could open?" "Yes," the boy whispered. "Because every circle I've seen here, nests, songs, even silence, they close, but they also open. Always." For a long time, Orgalorg said nothing. Then he let out a slow, trembling breath, as though something heavy had loosened in his chest. The boy began to see circles everywhere. In the loops of mist that curled and uncurled around him, in the fragments that vanished only to reappear days later, in the rhythm of his own breath, inhale, exhale, inhale again. He even began to sense circles in sorrow. The ache of his sister's fading would crest, break, soften, then return in a gentler form. Each wave of pain was not the same as the last. It curved, folded, taught him something new each time it came back. And he realized circles were not about going in place. They were about deepening, returning but never as the same self. One evening his sister led him to a corridor of shelves he had never seen before. The shelves bent in a perfect circle, enclosing them. She sat in the middle, her glow dim as candle smoke. "This is where I wanted to bring you," she said softly. "A circle of memory. Each shelf holds echoes of beginnings and endings." The boy touched one shelf and felt a fragment slip into his hand. It showed him his first step into the library, small, afraid, unsure. Another fragment showed him his sister laughing, when his glow first flickered brighter than hers. Another showed Orgalorg, not as he was, but as he had been, vast and radiant, wings like constellations. Each fragment was a circle, closing and opening, reminding him that every beginning held an end, and every ending a beginning. He wept quietly, not from despair, but from the tender ache of seeing life as it was, whole, circular, unbroken even in its breaks. That night, his sister whispered as she rested beside him, "When my circle closes, yours will open wider. You will carry me not as light but as memory, not as presence but as song. That is how circles work." The boy held her hand, afraid to let go. "I don't want your circle to close." She kissed his forehead, faint as mist. "No circle closes forever. Some simply change shape. Days stretched, or perhaps nights. Time bent in loops, and the boy stopped trying to count. He only breathed, waited, walked the circles of shelves. Sometimes the library felt infinite. Sometimes it felt like it was folding in on itself. Yet always he felt the rhythm of circles guiding him, not pushing, not pulling, but holding. One day, as he sat by the harp, his sister leaned against him, weaker than ever. Her voice was a thread. "When you feel lost, remember this. The circle of care never ends. It closes around you when you need safety. It opens when you need freedom. And even when you feel alone, you are still inside it." The boy closed his eyes, clutching her hand. He whispered, "I will remember. I promise. That night he dreamed of standing at the center of countless circles, rings of mist, rings of stars, rings of memory. They closed around him, then opened again, rippling outward. And within each opening he saw faces, his sister, Orgalorg, fragments of people he barely remembered. All of them circling, all of them endless, none of them gone. When he woke, he did not weep. Instead, he breathed deeply, letting the circle of his chest rise and fall, trusting the rhythm. The library seemed to hum with his new understanding. Shelves bent in softer arcs, fragments drifted in spirals, and even silence curved like a protective ring around his heart. The boy realized that circles were not just patterns, they were promises. Promises that nothing was wasted, nothing was final, nothing was ever only gone. Circles closed, circles opened, and in that endless rhythm life went on. The boy had learned much from the broken hymn. Its fractured music taught him to hear imperfection as beauty, to sit with sorrow as part of song. Yet what stayed with him most was not the sound itself, but the pauses between the sounds. For in every stumble of the harp, in every crack of its trembling voice, silence followed. Not empty silence, not void, but a presence as if the very stillness leaned close to cradle the sound. The boy began to wonder, perhaps silence was not the absence of song. Perhaps silence was a note of its own. One evening he sat again in the clearing where the harp rested. His sister was with him, though dim as smoke now, her glow fading so faintly that he feared each glance might be his last glimpse. She leaned against him, head light on his shoulder. The harp played its stammering hymn, and between each broken note came that familiar hush. The boy whispered, "Do you hear it? The space between the sounds?" His sister's lips curved into a weary smile. "The space is what lets the song breathe. But it feels like nothing," he said. "No," she breathed, voice soft as falling dust. "It feels like rest. Without silence, sound is only noise. Without pause, song has no meaning." The boy closed his eyes. And suddenly he heard it. Not the harp, not the crackling melody, but the gentle weight of stillness surrounding it. A silence that did not demand, did not hurry, did not wound. It only held. Later, Orgalorg joined them. The ancient watcher lowered himself beside the harp, his wings dragging along the mist. He listened for a long time without speaking. At last, his deep voice rumbled. "Long ago, when the skies were alive with battle, I sang war songs. They were loud, ceaseless, fierce. I thought strength meant no silence. I was wrong." The boy looked up at him. "Why wrong?" "Because songs without silence break the heart. They leave no room for breath, no space for grief, no place for love. My songs devoured themselves. They were fire-consuming fire." The boy bowed his head, thinking of his own restless heart, the times he had filled his loneliness with noise. And he understood, silence was not weakness but shelter. In the days that followed, the boy practiced listening, not to words, not to fragments, but to the spaces around them. When his sister whispered a memory, he let silence hold it after, instead of rushing to reply. When Orgalorg paused mid-sentence, the boy did not fill the gap. He waited, trusting the pause to speak for itself. Even in himself, he began to notice the hush between his thoughts. Like clouds drifting apart to reveal sky, the silence between worries sometimes showed him a wider peace. It startled him at first. Then it soothed him. One night, as the harp quivered its broken hymn, the boy placed his hand on the cracked frame. "You are not only your notes," he whispered. "You are also your rests." The harp trembled, releasing a soft vibration that lingered long after the sound had gone. The silence that followed felt deeper, almost luminous. His sister leaned close, her voice like the last glow of twilight. "That is the secret. What we call silence is not absence. It is presence too vast to name." The boy felt tears slip down his face. "And when you're gone, will silence hold me like that?" Her glow flickered, then steadied faintly. "Yes, even when my voice is gone, the silence will be full of me. If you listen, you will hear me there." The boy began to treat silence as a companion. He walked with it through the mist, sat with it in the halls, let it follow him into sleep. Sometimes it was heavy, pressing on his chest. Sometimes it was light, like cool air after rain. But always it was there, an invisible friend, asking nothing, giving everything. He noticed the library itself seemed built upon silence. The shelves shifted quietly, the fragments whispered in pauses more than in words. Even the mist moved in slow rhythms of stillness. The entire place was a hymn of silence punctuated by sound. One evening he asked Orgalorg, "Do you fear silence?" The watcher's eyes glowed faintly. "Once, yes. I feared it would reveal my emptiness. But now I know silence does not show what we lack. It shows what we carry." The boy thought of this often, and he began to see his sisters fading not only as loss, but as silence preparing to hold her. Perhaps when her light was gone, she would not vanish. She would simply become part of the space between notes. That thought both broke and healed him. One night, the boy dreamed. He stood in a great hall where countless harps hung, each broken in its own way. Some had only a few strings, some none at all. Yet the hall was not empty. Between the fragments of their music stretched a silence so vast it hummed like a living thing. He walked through it, touched it, and felt it embrace him. In that silence he heard echoes. Laughter, whispers, the brush of his sister's hand, Orgalorg's deep sighs. The silence carried everything. It was not void. It was memory made infinite. When he woke, he wept, not from despair, but from the deep peace of knowing that silence, too, was a song. The next time he sat with his sister, he did not speak. She did not either. Their glows flickered side by side in quiet harmony. The harp sang its broken hymn, faltering and soft, and the silence between notes wove them all together. The boy thought, this is love too. Not words, not even touch. Just presence shared in stillness, and as his sister leaned her faint glow against him, he whispered, "When circles close, when songs break, when voices fade." "Silence will carry us always," she smiled through her dimness. "Yes, and you will learn to hear me there." That night the library seemed to rest with them. The shelves stilled, the mist hushed. The fragments drifted more slowly. It was as if the entire place leaned into silence, not as an end, but as a cradle. The boy lay down beside his sister, eyelids heavy, and let the silence sing him into sleep. The boy awoke to the sound of water, not the trickle of rain nor the hush of mist, but a deeper music, steady, endless, alive. He followed it through the dim corridors of the library, until the shelves thinned and the ground grew damp beneath his feet. Ahead, the mist parted, and there it was, a river flowing through the heart of the library, wide and dark as midnight glass. It shimmered with faint light, as if every droplet carried a memory. The boy leaned close to the edge and saw faces gliding just beneath the surface, vanishing before he could name them. His breath caught. "What is this?" Orgalorg's voice came from behind, slow and grave. "The river of lost names." The watcher stepped forward, wings trailing against the mist. His eyes glowed faintly as he gazed at the current. Every name forgotten by the living finds its way here. Every child who once cried out in joy. Every elder whose voice once echoed in halls. Every companion faded into silence. Their names flow together, without end. The boy stared. So, no one is ever truly gone. Orgalorg's feathers shivered. Not gone, but unremembered. That is its own kind of death. The boy felt the words strike deep. He thought of his sister's glow fading day by day. He thought of his own name. Who would speak it when he was gone? He whispered almost to himself, "Will my name end up here?" Orgalorg lowered his head. "All names end here, child." "Even mine." The boy dipped his fingers into the water. The river was cold, colder than any winter he had ever known, but alive. 1,000 whispers seemed to bloom around him as the current licked his skin. "Listen closely," Orgalorg murmured. The boy closed his eyes. The whispers sharpened. At first they were chaos, broken syllables, fragments of languages he didn't know. But then one rose clearer, trembling like a candle flame. A child's laugh carried on the sound of her name, spoken once long ago. The boy gasped, heart racing. "I heard her," Orgalorg nodded. "Each name carries its story. Each story carries its echo, but only in fragments, never whole. That is the sorrow of this place." The boy leaned closer. He wanted to plunge into the water, to gather names like treasures, to keep them from dissolving. But as he leaned forward, his sister's faint glow pulsed behind him. "Be careful," she whispered. "The river does not give back what it takes." He froze, turning to her. She was weaker now. Her light like smoke caught on the wind, but her eyes glowed gently as she touched his arm. "Listen, but do not drown." Together they sat at the river's edge. The harp lay near them, plucking its broken hymn as though in dialogue with the current. And the boy listened. One by one, names rose like bubbles, surfaced and slipped away. Some belonged to strangers whose stories he could only guess. A warrior's cry, a child's lullaby, a mother's song, but then he heard something that stopped his breath. It was her name. His sister's. Not spoken by her, not whispered in her voice, but carried faintly in the river, as though the current had already claimed it. The boy jerked upright. "No, she's still here. You can't take her yet." His cry rippled across the water, but the river paid him no mind. His sister only closed her eyes, leaning gently against him. "It is already flowing," she whispered. "My name is leaving me," the boy wept. "But if I keep saying it, if I never stop, won't it stay?" Orgalorg's deep voice answered. "Perhaps. A name survives as long as it is spoken. But even the strongest voices fade. That is the truth of the river. One day every name will rest here, carried into forever." The boy clenched his fists. He wanted to scream her name into the air, carve it into the shelves, scatter it like seeds through every hall of the library. Yet even as he thought it, he knew. Time would wear his voice away too. His sister touched his face. "Don't fight the river. Walk with it." Her words softened him, but the ache did not leave. "If you go, how will I find you?" She smiled faintly, though her glow flickered thin as a thread. "Follow the silence between notes. Follow the river of lost names. I will be there." They stayed by the river for many nights. The boy listened to names drift by, learning to hear them without grasping. Some nights he repeated them softly, giving each echo one last voice before it slipped away. Other nights he simply let them pass, trusting the current to carry what he could not hold. Over time he noticed something. The river was not only sorrow. It was also memory, alive and moving, refusing to let even the smallest name vanish completely. What the world forgot, the river kept. That truth became a comfort. One night Orgalorg told his own story. "My true name has already passed into this river," the watcher admitted. "Orgalorg is not the name I was born with. That one was spoken by a mother long forgotten, on a mountain long crumbled. I do not even remember the sound of it." The boy looked at him, stunned. "Then aren't you afraid?" The watcher's wings lifted faintly like a sigh. "I was once, but I have learned that names do not die when they reach this river. They change. They become part of something greater. I am not less for having lost mine. I am more." The boy let the thought sink deep, though it ached. When the harp sang beside them, the boy began to hear the river and the music together, weaving one hymn. The harp's silence carried the water, and the river's whispers filled the gaps in the song. He wondered if perhaps all things were like this, fragments feeding into one current, silence binding them all together. And he thought, maybe even if his sister's name slipped into the river, it would not mean she was gone. She would live on in the current, in the silence, in him. At dawn the boy rose. He took his sister's hand, dim and trembling, and whispered her name aloud, slow and careful, as though pressing it into the air. Then he whispered his own. The river carried them both away, and for a moment he felt grief rise like a storm. But beneath it, quieter, steadier, he felt something else, the peace of knowing no name was ever wholly lost. He looked at his sister, glow faint as breath. She smiled. "Now you understand." He nodded, tears soft on his face. "The river doesn't take, it keeps." And together they sat watching the current until their names, their silences, and the river itself became one long song without end. There are shadows that frighten and shadows that cradle. Some stretch tall and fierce, consuming everything in their reach. Others lie quiet, softer than dusk, a place where the weary may rest unseen. The boy did not know which kind of shadow awaited him when he first heard Golb's name spoken in whispers, but he would soon learn. It began on a night when the library itself seemed restless. The shelves creaked as though burdened by too many stories. The lamps flickered with light that wavered like breathing. Even the river of lost names grew murky, its whispers drowned beneath a low hum that rattled the air. The boy and his sister felt it before they saw it. A heaviness pressed upon them, not violent but dense, like the weight of a forgotten storm cloud. Orgalorg, usually steady and calm, bent his head low. His voice was almost reverent. "He comes," the boy trembled. "Golb." The name alone felt dangerous, like a stone dropped into still water. His sister's faint glow flickered, as though even her light was hesitant in the presence of such a shadow. But the watcher nodded. Golb is not destruction alone. He is unmaking, yes. He is silence after song. But shadows. Shadows can soften if one chooses to see them not as hunger, but as rest. The boy could not imagine it. Golb, the great unraveler, the devourer of forms, soft. Yet even as his fear surged, he saw something in the mist, not sharp, not clawed, but blurred, like the outline of an enormous figure resting in the distance. The figure did not advance. It did not roar or thunder. It simply sat, a shape vast as the horizon, folded in stillness, its edges glowing faintly red as if embers lived beneath its skin. Golb's shadow stretched across the water, across the shelves, across the boy himself. And yet, it was not cruel, it was cool, quiet, almost protective. The boy clung to his sister's hand. Why doesn't he strike? Orgalorg's wings folded, feathers brushing the ground. Because even shadow grows weary. Even the unmaker rests. The boy thought of the river, how it carried names not to erase them but to hold them. He thought of silence between notes, how it did not destroy music, but made it whole, maybe, just maybe. Even Golb had another side. He stepped closer. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to close his eyes. But something in his heart, small, trembling, yet persistent, urged him on. His sister's glow pulsed faintly as though agreeing. The boy whispered, "Golb, can you hear me?" The shadow stirred, but only slightly. Their breath, long and low, rolled across the library, dimming the lamps, rippling the shelves. The boy swayed, but did not fall, and then he felt it. A whisper, not in his ears, but in his chest, deep as a heartbeat. "I hear," the boy gasped. His sister clutched him tightly. But Orgalorg's eyes glimmered with a strange sadness. Few have ever spoken with him. Fewer still have listened. The boy swallowed, heart pounding. Why do you unmake? Why do you take?" The whisper came again, layered like many voices together, some grieving, some calm. "I do not take. I return. All that has shape longs to unshape. All that has weight longs to rest. I am rest." The boy's fear bent under the weight of those words. Rest? Could destruction be rest? Could an ending be soft? He remembered the river. He remembered silence. Perhaps this was not so different. His sister leaned forward, voice thin but steady. "If you are rest, will you carry me?" The boy's heart lurched. "No, don't say that." But she only smiled, tired, glowing faintly like a candle almost spent. "Brother, I am already fading. Perhaps Golb's shadow is not a thief. Perhaps it is a bed." Golb's vast form seemed to bow, its edges dimming, its shadow curling around them like a blanket. And for the first time the boy did not feel fear. He felt a hush. He sank to his knees, tears brimming. "If you take her," the whisper thrummed. "Not take, hold, shadows soften." The boy pressed his forehead to his sister's hand. He thought of all the nights they had wandered together, of every laugh, every shared silence, every story whispered in the library's endless halls. And he understood. Nothing would erase that. Even if her name slipped into the river, even if her glow dimmed, she would live on in him, in silence, in shadow, perhaps even in Golb. The harp, as though sensing the moment, plucked a trembling note. And then it fell still. But in that silence the boy heard something else, the faint, steady hum of Golb's shadow, not hunger, not chaos, but calm, a rhythm like breathing, a promise that endings were not sharp, but round, curving into beginnings unseen. The boy lifted his eyes. "If I let you hold her, will I ever see her again?" The answer came slow, vast, unhurried. "In all shadows you will find me. In me you will find her." He did not fully understand. But the weight of the words pressed into him, not as fear, but as a strange peace. His sister smiled, her glow now no brighter than mist. "See? Even the greatest shadow has gentleness. Even endings are not cruel." The boy laid his head against her shoulder. He wept softly, but his tears were not frantic anymore. They flowed like the river, inevitable, continuous, carrying both grief and love together. Orgalorg lowered his wings, bowing his head. Few who meet Golb see this face. Count yourself among them. And the boy realized. Golb was not only terror, he was also tenderness hidden deep. His shadow could destroy, yes, but it could also soften, cradle, hush. The vast figure stirred once more. Slowly its outline blurred, dissolving back into the mist, leaving only quiet behind. The library's shelves straightened, the lamp steadied. The river whispered once again, but the shadow's hush remained in the boy's chest, like a hand resting there. He turned to his sister. She was still with him, fading, yes, but still. Her smile lingered like starlight before dawn. "Not yet," she whispered. "But soon." The boy nodded, and for the first time he did not resist. He held her hand gently, and let Golb's softened shadow linger around them, not as fear but as promise. That night, when the boy finally closed his eyes, he dreamed of shadows that were not dark but warm, not endings but beds, not erasure but return, and in that dream he heard a voice deep as rivers, soft as silence. "All things unmake, all things rest. Do not fear me. I will hold what you love." The library had always been a place of shadows and whispers, of half-remembered hymns and rivers of forgotten names. Yet on one quiet night, when the boy felt his heart heaviest, something new appeared among the shelves, something small, something soft, something glowing. It was a lantern, not grand or golden, not heavy with jewels, but humble. Its frame was woven from reeds and thin metal wires, patched and uneven. Its light was not fierce like fire, nor sharp like lightning. Instead, it glowed with a tender shimmer, as though carrying the memory of dawn inside it. The boy found it resting on a table of dust-covered books, waiting for him. At first he thought it a trick of the lamps, some forgotten object catching their glow. But when he reached for it, the lantern warmed in his hands, pulsing faintly as though it had been waiting. His sister leaned close, her fading glow brushing against its surface. "It feels alive," she whispered, and indeed, the lantern pulsed like a heart. Not loud, not demanding, just steady, gentle, soft. Orgalorg approached, wings heavy with silence. His voice, when it came, was slower than usual. "The lantern of the gentle light. I have not seen it in many centuries." The boy's eyes widened. "You know it?" "I have seen its glow on the edge of endings," Orgalorg murmured. "It appears not to guide the strong, but the weary. Not to reveal all paths, but to warm the cold places between them." The boy held it tighter. "Then maybe—" It came for her. His sister smiled faintly, her glow blending with the lantern's. For the first time in many days, the boy felt her warmth steady, not diminishing. That night, they carried the lantern through the aisles. Wherever they walked, the shadows softened, curling back like curtains drawn away from windows. The shelves that once loomed now looked less menacing, less endless, more like guardians bowing in silence. Even the river seemed calmer, its whispers harmonizing with the lantern's hum. The boy whispered, "It doesn't fight the dark. It doesn't push it away, it just makes it gentle." His sister touched the lantern's glass. "Like Golb's shadow." "Yes," the boy breathed, "but kinder, easier to carry." For many days the lantern became their companion. When grief pressed too heavy, they would set it between them and let its glow breathe quietly until the sorrow eased. When the river's whispers grew overwhelming, the lantern softened them into songs. When Orgalorg folded into silence, the lantern's hum filled the spaces he left. The boy began to speak to it as though it were listening. He told it small stories. The first time he and his sister climbed a tree, the taste of bread their mother once made, the sound of wind across the fields. The lantern never answered, but its glow pulsed brighter when he spoke, as though honoring each memory. One evening, as his sister slept with her head against his shoulder, the boy turned to Orgalorg. "Why does it appear only now? Why not sooner?" The watcher studied him with long, unreadable eyes. "Because gentle light is not sought. It finds you only when you stop running from shadow." The boy thought of the river, of Golb's hush, of his sister's fading glow. Perhaps he had been too busy fighting endings, too afraid of loss. Only now, with his heart quiet, could the lantern come. He nodded slowly. "Then it came not to stop the darkness, but to remind me it isn't cruel." Orgalorg lowered his head, feathers rustling. "You understand." Later the boy dreamed. In his dream he walked with the lantern across a field of stars. Each star whispered a name, some bright, some dim, but none of them frightened him. The lantern's light caught their voices and wove them into a lullaby. At the center of the field stood a tree, vast and silver, its roots sinking into the cosmos. At the tree's base sat his sister, her glow faint, but her smile clear. She held the lantern in her lap, rocking it as though it were a child. When the boy reached her, she whispered, "When my name drifts into the river, let this lantern carry it. Promise me." He woke with tears in his eyes, and the lantern glowing warmly in his hands. The days that followed blurred together. But one moment stood out. A night when his sister's glow faltered so weakly he thought it might vanish entirely. He held the lantern close to her chest. "Please," he whispered. "Hold her." The lantern pulsed softly, surrounding her with its warmth. Her breath steadied, her eyes opened faintly, and she whispered, "It doesn't hurt." The boy clutched her hand. The lantern was not stopping her fading, but it was easing it, making it tender, making it slow enough for him to walk beside her without despair. Orgalorg, standing behind them, spoke low. "This is the lantern's gift, not life eternal, not strength against the inevitable, but gentleness, and gentleness is enough." The boy nodded through his tears. He realized then that he did not need to save her. He only needed to love her through the fading. The lantern's glow reminded him, even sorrow could be carried with tenderness. As they wandered onward, the boy began leaving pieces of himself in the lantern. A memory, a word, a small melody hummed under his breath. Each offering seemed to linger inside its light, as if the lantern collected the gentle fragments of every soul it touched. "Maybe," he whispered to his sister one night, "when you're gone, I'll still see you here." In this glow, she smiled, eyes half closed. "And maybe I'll see you too. In every name it carries, in every warmth it gives." One evening, when the lantern burned brightest, Orgalorg bowed deeply. Few receive such a companion. Fewer still recognize its true gift. You do not wield it, you walk with it. That is why it shines. The boy touched the lantern, feeling its pulse steady in his palms. "It's not mine, it's ours." His sister nodded, resting her head against him. "A light that belongs to no one, yet softens everything." The lantern flickered once, as if agreeing, and for the first time since entering the library, the boy felt something like home. Not a place, not an end, but a quiet glow in the middle of shadows. The lantern of the gentle light would not banish loss. It would not rewrite fate, but it would soften every silence, cradle every shadow, and carry every name with tenderness. And that, the boy thought as he leaned into its warmth, was more than enough. That night, as he drifted toward sleep, he whispered to the lantern, "Keep her safe, keep her soft, and when I fade, keep me too." The lantern glowed in answer. Steady, patient, eternal in its gentleness, the Library of Clouds, with its endless corridors and hushed echoes, had never known laughter like this. It was faint, yes, and worn around the edges, but laughter nonetheless. The boy had almost forgotten what it felt like to hear joy trembling through the air like birdsong. It began when the lantern of the gentle light pulsed brighter than usual, as though it was summoning something unseen. The shelves bent slightly, their shadows curling inward. The air smelled faintly of bread, honey, and herbs. Then, one by one, tables appeared, long wooden planks smoothed by age, set with chipped bowls and uneven cups. No grand banners, no trumpets, no blazing fires. Just simple warmth. Orgalorg spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of both ritual and relief. "The farewell feast has been laid." The boy blinked. "Farewell?" The watcher lowered his wings. "Every soul who fades deserves a table, a seat, a final meal. Here the library calls forth all that has been shared, all that was once tasted together, and lays it as offering. Not for the body, for memory." The boy turned to his sister. She was weaker than ever, her glow fragile as smoke, but her smile, though faint, widened at the sight of the tables. "It smells like home." They walked closer. The boy's eyes widened as he recognized the food. There was the soup their mother once made on rainy days, thin but rich with warmth. There were the small sandwiches his sister had adored, crusts cut carefully away. A bowl of berries glistened as they once had on summer mornings. Even a simple jug of milk, sweet and cold, rested beside a loaf of bread he swore he had not tasted since childhood. His throat tightened. "But how?" "The library remembers," Orgalorg said. "Even what you forget, it remembers. Tonight it gathers what binds you together, so farewell is not emptiness but fullness." They sat. His sister's hands trembled as she lifted a piece of bread, but the lantern's glow steadied her. She took a slow bite and her eyes fluttered shut. "It tastes exactly as it did then." The boy watched, torn between joy and sorrow. "Does this mean it's time?" She set the bread down, leaning gently against him. "Not yet, but close. Think of this as the river's kindness, the way it lets us taste the past before it carries us forward." So they ate, at first in silence, savoring, The boy let the soup warm his chest, let the berries burst sharp and sweet on his tongue. He spoke quietly of the first time he had stolen one of those berries before dinner, and how his sister had scolded him, though she laughed too. She giggled faintly at the memory, her voice like a bell cracked but still ringing true. "You always thought you were sneaky." Orgalorg listened, silent, though the faintest curve of his beak suggested something like a smile. The harp began to play, though no hands touched it. Its broken hymn softened into something almost whole, weaving with the lantern's glow. The feast became more than food. It became story they remembered together. The way rain smelled on the roof of their childhood home, the taste of wild apples, sour yet irresistible, the lullabies their mother hummed when sleep came too slow. Each memory was not spoken to cling, but to release, offered into the lantern's glow, set gently upon the table like another dish to be shared. At one point the boy noticed something strange. The shadows gathered near the edges of the feast, but they did not intrude. They lingered like guests without names, waiting quietly, bowing their heads. He thought of Golb's softened shadow and realized even endings had come to listen. His sister grew weary, her glow flickering, but she pressed on, lifting her cup with effort. "To memory," she whispered. The boy clinked his cup against hers, tears in his eyes. "To memory." Even Orgalorg raised a wing in solemn salute. "To memory." They drank. The boy could not help but ask, voice trembling, Will you still taste this where you are going?" His sister smiled, weak but serene. "Perhaps not with my tongue, but with my soul, yes. Every flavor is a thread, every memory a stitch. They will follow me into whatever comes after." She reached across the table, pressing her hand against his. "And when you taste them again, you'll find me there." He wept softly, not hiding it, letting the tears mingle with the taste of honey on his lips. The feast was not meant to erase sorrow. It was meant to carry it gently, to season grief with sweetness, so the parting would not be bitter alone. The harp's notes bent into lullaby. The lantern glowed like dawn. The shadows stood in silence. As the night deepened, Orgalorg spoke again. "This feast will not last. The library does not hold forever. It teaches how to let go. Take what you can into your heart. The rest will flow to the river." The boy nodded, though his chest ached. He ate another piece of bread, not to fill his stomach, but to carve the taste into memory. He held his sister close as she sipped the last of her milk. Her glow dimming like twilight. For a moment, the boy almost asked the library to stop, to keep the feast forever, to freeze this moment so she would never fade. But he remembered the river, and Golb's shadow, and the lantern. He knew to hold forever is not love. To walk with fading is. When the plates emptied, when the cup stilled, when the harp quieted again, they lingered at the table. The boy leaned against his sister, her glow faint but warm against his shoulder. "Did you like it?" he whispered. Her eyes fluttered shut. "It was perfect." A full heart makes the letting go easier. He pressed his forehead against hers. "I'll remember every bite." "Good," she whispered. "Then I'll never be gone." And with that, the lantern pulsed once more, carrying the glow of the feast into its gentle heart. The shadows bowed. The library sighed as though relieved, and the boy, though drowning in sorrow, felt a strange fullness, like a final meal before a long journey, nourishing enough to carry him through whatever silence lay ahead. The library of clouds slept after the feast. Its corridors dimmed, its shelves settled, and its harp fell into silence once again. The boy and his sister lingered beside the long table until the lantern's glow whispered that it was time to move on. The boy had thought nothing could follow such a farewell. Yet, as they stepped past the shelves and into a great atrium of glass, he realized the journey still held one more offering. Above them stretched a sky vast and black, pricked with stars. They were not the silent stars he had grown used to, cold, distant and watching. Tonight the stars leaned closer, and they began to hum. At first it was low, a vibration more felt than heard, like the earth's secret breath. The boy held his sister's hand, startled. The hum rose into a melody, fragmented, uncertain, as though remembering itself after a long silence. Then gently the stars sang, not words, not language, just sound woven of light and distance, the music of fire too far away to warm but near enough to be felt in the heart. The boy shivered. "Are they calling to us?" Orgalorg's feathers rustled, his tone reverent. "No, they are answering. You've spoken your memories into the feast. You've carried your grief into the river. Now the heavens respond as they once did in the oldest days. The sister leaned into the boy, her glow faint but steady. It feels like they know me. The boy tilted his head back, overwhelmed. He remembered nights as a child, lying on grass with his sister, pointing out constellations they barely knew the names of. They had made up stories for them instead. The archer, the swan, the sleeping king. His sister had once claimed the stars whispered when no one listened, but he had laughed at her then, calling it a dreamer's fancy. Now, hearing them sing, he almost fell to his knees. She had been right all along. The song grew clearer. The stars pulsed in patterns, each note carried on a beam of light that seemed to reach through time itself. The boy realized he recognized some of the melodies, not because he had heard them before, but because they matched his own heartbeats, his own childhood rhythms. The stars were not giving a song. They were reflecting his own back to him. They're singing us, he whispered. Yes, Orgalorg said. Every soul carries a music of its own, unheard yet constant. When the farewell feast releases it, the sky responds. It gives you back your own song so you know you were never silent. The boy gripped his sister's hand tighter. Tears blurred his vision, though he smiled through them. His sister raised her trembling hand to the sky as if trying to touch the notes themselves. And to the boy's wonder, one star flared brighter in answer. Her glow responded, for just a moment stronger, fuller. The boy gasped. Did you see that? It heard you. Her voice shook but was steady. Then it means I still matter. Even when I go, my song won't be lost. Her words hung heavy in the air, but instead of breaking him, they steadied him. The boy lifted his head higher. Then sing with them, he said softly. And she did. Her voice was weak but carried truth. A low hum that soon joined the sky's music, weaving through it like thread through fabric. At first her notes wavered, but then they grew steadier, bolder, until her voice sounded like starlight itself. The boy watched, overwhelmed with awe. For a fleeting moment, she looked not sickly or fading, but whole, radiant, luminous, a child of the stars themselves. He could not remain silent. His throat trembled, but he let out a note of his own. Clumsy, raw, broken, yet sincere. His voice joined hers, and to his astonishment the stars flared brighter, as though pleased by the attempt. The heavens answered. It was no longer just song. It was conversation, her note, gentle. His rough, uneven. The stars, expansive, wrapping both their voices in warmth. The boy realized this was the truest prayer he had ever known. Not asking, not begging, not bargaining. Just answering and being answered. Orgalorg lowered his head, his wings forming a circle around them, though he did not join the song. His silence was reverent, protective. The lantern beside him pulsed with each note, brightening in rhythm with the music. The boy sang until his throat ached, but he would not stop. Every breath was a promise, every sound a tether. His sister sang too, her glow flickering but resilient. Together they filled the atrium with a music that felt older than sorrow, larger than death, and the stars sang back. The boy thought suddenly of all the forgotten names lost to the river, of the fragments of friendship scattered through ooh, of the broken hymn the harp had once played. He thought of cycles of care, gardens in the sky, and the silence between notes. Every piece, every fragment of his journey seemed to rise with the music, woven into the starlight itself. He understood then, nothing was ever lost. Not truly. Every sound, every memory, every love carried an echo. The universe did not discard them. It returned them in song. His sister leaned against him, tired but smiling. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. He nodded, choking back tears. "I hear everything." She closed her eyes, still humming softly. "Then when I'm gone, follow the music. That's where you'll find me." The song swelled, rising like a tide. For a moment, the stars seemed to bend closer, their light shimmering down upon the atrium like silver rain. The boy lifted his face and let it wash over him. It was not just starlight, it was recognition. The universe knew his grief, his love, his sister, and it was singing her into eternity. At last the melody softened. The stars' voices faded back into hum, then into silence. The sky returned to stillness. The boy felt the emptiness return, but it was different now. Less a wound, more a hollow vessel filled with echoes. He pressed his forehead to his sister's, their breaths mingling in quiet rhythm. "Thank you," he whispered, though he was unsure whether he meant her, the stars, Or both. Perhaps it was the same. Orgalorg finally spoke. When the stars sing back, it means they have taken her song into themselves. It will live among them, beyond time, beyond silence. The boy nodded, unable to speak. His heart was breaking and mending all at once. His sister exhaled softly, her glow dim but serene. Then I am ready. And though the boy trembled, though every part of him wanted to beg for more, he found himself whispering, "Then so am I." Above them, though quiet now, the stars still glimmered as if smiling. The library sighed, its shelves rustling like distant applause, and the lantern glowed, not with sorrow, but with the gentle triumph of a song returned. The boy closed his eyes, listening to the silence that followed. But in that silence he still felt the music. The stars had sung, and in their song nothing, no memory, no love, no sister, was ever truly lost. After the stars sang, the boy thought there would be nothing left. The heavens had answered, the feast was finished, and his sister's glow had nearly gone. Yet as silence fell, the library's lantern flickered with a new direction. A door appeared at the far end of the atrium, black, unlit, its frame trembling like a wound in the air. The boy felt a chill. He knew this was no ordinary door, no quiet passageway. This was the threshold he had long feared, the place where even songs could not reach. The void. His sister's fingers pressed against his. "We have to go," she said gently. "It's waiting." Orgalorg bowed his head, his eyes reflecting deep sorrow. Few walk there willingly, but sometimes to carry love beyond loss, one must face what the void holds. The boy wanted to turn back, to cling to the light of the stars, to hide among the shelves. Yet something deeper urged him forward. He had seen gardens, rivers, fragments, and skies that answered. To end the journey in avoidance would betray them all. So he breathed once, deeply, and stepped toward the door. The moment he passed through, the world dissolved. No shelves, no sky, no stars. Just a vast, endless dark, so deep it felt thicker than air, as though silence itself had become solid. His feet touched nothing, yet he was not falling. The boy floated untethered, and in that void he heard a sound. It was not like the stars' song. It was smaller, more fragile, like a child humming to themselves in an empty room. A voice that carried loneliness, but also a strange, innocent wonder. The boy whispered, "Who's there?" The humming stopped. Out of the void a small figure appeared. It was a child, a boy, no older than the boy had once been, barefoot, clothed in shadows. His eyes glimmered faintly, not with malice, but with a haunting emptiness. He clutched something close to his chest, a broken toy, a shape like a stuffed animal with missing pieces. The boy's breath caught. He felt inexplicably that he was staring at a reflection, not of his face, but of some hidden part of himself, lonely, unspoken, forgotten. The child tilted his head. "Why did you come here?" His voice echoed as though spoken from far away. I don't know," the boy admitted. "Maybe to find you." The child studied him with eyes too old for his face. "No one ever comes here." "They're afraid. They leave me behind." The boy's throat tightened. "You've been alone." The child nodded slowly. "Always. I was born from what was left unsaid. The fears, the grief, the silences. I live here where no one wants to look." He hugged the broken toy closer. "But I am still you, the part you tried to hide." The boy's chest ached. He remembered nights when he cried into pillows so no one would hear. Days when he pretended to be strong for his sister, but carried fear so deep it hollowed him. This child, this fragile presence was those feelings, crystallized into form. His sister's glow entered the void then, faint but steady. She drifted beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "I see him too," she whispered. "He's been with you always." The shadow self. The frightened child. The boy swallowed hard. "What do I do?" Her voice was gentle, certain. "You don't fight him. You don't abandon him. You care for him the way you cared for me." The boy turned to the child, heart trembling. He knelt in the void, reaching out his hand. "I didn't mean to leave you here," he said softly. "I was scared of you, scared of what you made me feel. But you're part of me, and I don't want you to be alone anymore." The child's eyes widened, suspicious yet longing. "You'd stay, even if I'm broken?" The boy smiled through his tears. "Especially because you're broken. That's what makes you mine." The void shivered. For a moment the darkness cracked with faint threads of light. The child stared at the boy's hand, then slowly placed his small palm against it. A flood of warmth surged through the boy. Memories rushed back, not the easy ones of laughter or play, but the harder ones. Nights when he felt small, hours when he doubted his worth, tears he never let anyone see. All of it rose like water, threatening to drown him, but he did not let go. He held the child's hand steady. He let the pain pass through him without pushing it away. And in doing so, the pain softened. The child's form began to glow faintly, like his sister's. The broken toy in his arms mended itself, piece by piece, until it looked whole again. The child smiled for the first time, faint but real. "You found me," he whispered. The boy pulled him close, cradling him. "You were never lost." His sister's voice trembled with awe. "You've done what few ever do. You've loved even the shadow within." The void around them began to shift. The darkness loosened, no longer suffocating but spacious, almost gentle. Stars appeared faintly in the distance, as if the song from earlier had followed them here. The boy realized the void was not an enemy. It was a womb of silence waiting for acceptance. In its heart lived the child, the part of him that needed care most of all. The boy, his sister, and the child sat together in that vastness. No urgency, no fear, just quiet presence. The boy stroked the child's hair, whispering, "I'll carry you with me now, always." And the child, pressing close, replied, "Then I won't be afraid anymore." The sister's glow dimmed, but she smiled, serene. This was always the journey, not to fight monsters or chase gods, to love every piece of yourself, even the ones you wanted to forget. The boy nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I understand now." She touched his cheek, her hand flickering like candlelight. "Then my part is done, but yours continues." He clutched both her hand and the child's, unwilling to release either. "Don't leave me," he whispered. Her glow flickered once more, then steadied. "I won't leave. I'll just become part of the song, and you'll hear me always." The void began to dissolve into light. The stars drew closer, humming faintly, waiting to carry the sister into their chorus. The child pressed closer into the boy's side, safe now, whole. The boy realized he was not losing her. Not truly, for he had found the part of himself that could carry her forward. The child within the void now embraced. The sister whispered, "Thank you for finding him. Thank you for finding yourself." And with that, her glow lifted, dissolving into the starlight. The stars welcomed her, singing her voice into eternity. The boy clutched the child close, his tears falling into the vastness. But beneath his grief, he felt peace. He was no longer afraid of the dark, for within the void he had found not emptiness but a child, and in loving him he had discovered a love vast enough to hold everything. The void was gone. The stars had reclaimed his sister, weaving her into their eternal chorus. The boy stood now at the edge of something new. The child he had embraced still held tightly at his side. There was no great feast, no harp, no lantern, only a long pale road stretching across the horizon, like a ribbon laid upon nothing. It shimmered faintly, bending toward no clear destination. And yet he felt it calling. The child clung to him. "Where does it go?" The boy's voice was quiet. "Forward." The word felt simple, almost empty, but it carried the weight of everything he had learned. Forward, not back to what was lost, not clinging to what had been, but walking, carrying love, grief, and silence together. And so, without ceremony, he stepped onto the road. The sound of his footfalls surprised him. They echoed, though there were no walls to catch the sound. Each step rang like a bell, distant yet steady. The child's smaller footsteps followed, lighter but echoing too, weaving with his own rhythm. He did not know how long they walked. Time blurred on this road, days folding into nights, nights melting into mornings. But he noticed something subtle. Though the path was pale, shadows sometimes brushed across it. They were not frightening, just faint reminders that light was never whole without shade. The boy thought of his sister. The ache of her absence was heavy, yet he did not crumble beneath it. He felt it as one feels a heartbeat, persistent, grounding. It would not leave him, and perhaps it was not meant to. At times the child grew tired, and the boy would lift him into his arms. Carrying him was strangely familiar, like carrying his own past. The weight was not burdensome. It felt right, necessary. One night, or what felt like night, the child stirred against him. "Will we walk forever?" The boy thought carefully before answering. "Maybe. Or maybe the walk is the forever." The child frowned, half asleep. "That sounds lonely." The boy kissed the top of his head. Not lonely, just endless. And endless doesn't have to be sad. It just means we keep going and keep carrying. The child seemed to accept this. He drifted back into sleep, his breathing soft and steady against the boy's chest. The road stretched on, sometimes widening into fields of memory. There the boy saw echoes of himself, playing with his sister in golden meadows, watching the clouds, making up stories for the stars. He did not step into these echoes. He simply walked past them, acknowledging them with a small smile, a nod, a whisper of thanks. Other times the road narrowed until it was barely a thread across a chasm of silence. The boy held the child closer, steadying his steps. He realized then that the walk was not only about endurance, it was about trust. Trust in the road, in his own feet, in the silence itself. And still, he walked. Once they came across a traveler, a shadowy figure sitting at the side of the road, head bowed. The boy paused, unsure whether to speak. But the child tugged at his sleeve. "Ask him his name," the child urged. The boy knelt by the figure. "Hello, who are you?" The shadow lifted its head. Its voice was thin, like paper. No one asks anymore. So the boy asked again, gently. And slowly the figure spoke a name, fragile, trembling, as though it had been forgotten for centuries. The boy repeated it aloud, carefully, with reverence. The figure smiled faintly, then dissolved into light, leaving behind a faint shimmer on the road. The boy realized then that even on this endless walk, care could still be given. Even here kindness mattered. There were moments when the boy longed to stop. His legs ached, his spirit felt worn. But whenever he slowed, the child pressed his hand tighter and whispered, "Keep going." And he did. Not because the road demanded it, but because walking had become his way of loving. Each step was a memory honored, a bond carried forward, a promise kept. The stars sometimes appeared above him, faint but steady. He searched them for his sister, wondering if her song was among them now. He never heard it directly, but sometimes when the silence grew deep, he felt a warmth in his chest, as though she hummed quietly within him. That was enough. The boy did not measure his journey by distance anymore. He measured it by presence. Each step was an act of being here, of moving gently into what was next. The road gave no destination, no map, no promise of arrival. It gave only itself, and the boy, once frightened of emptiness, now found comfort in that simplicity. The road stretched and he stretched with it. The silence deepened and he breathed into it, and still he walked. One day, or perhaps a night, the child tugged at his hand and pointed ahead. Look, the road glimmered faintly, rippling like water. For a moment, it looked as if stars themselves were woven into its surface, each step landing on constellations. The boy felt awe swell in his chest. He knelt to the child. "Do you see? We're walking not just through emptiness, but through memory, through song, through every life that ever walked before us." The child's eyes shone. "Then we're never alone." The boy kissed his forehead. "Never." And so he continued, past shadows, past echoes, past the ache of loss and into the vastness of what could not be named. Each step was both farewell and greeting. Each breath was both grief and gratitude. The boy no longer feared where the road would lead. For he understood now. The journey itself was the destination. To walk was to live. To carry was to love. And still he walked. The road had grown soft beneath his feet, fading into hues of twilight. The child he carried now rested lightly against his side, eyes half closed, drifting in that delicate space between wakefulness and dreams. The boy, once full of fear and questions, now felt only calm. The journey that had begun in uncertainty, with shadows and loss and rivers of forgotten names, had brought him here, closer to understanding, closer to peace. Above the stars shimmered faintly, like whispers of lullabies. The boy did not speak to them. He had learned that sometimes silence filled with presence carries more meaning than words. They came to a gentle hill, its crest glowing faintly with the lantern's soft memory. Here the boy paused. The horizon was a curve of soft light, not sun, not moon, but a gentle blending of everything he had known and loved. He felt the weight of his journey press on him, and yet for the first time it was a welcome weight, not heavy, not sorrowful, but full. The child stirred against him, murmuring softly, "Is this it?" The boy looked down, brushing a hand through the child's hair. "I think so." This is the place where the road ends. Not with a bang, not with fireworks, but quietly, like a breath. Like a song fading into night. The child smiled faintly. I like it here. He sat, letting the child rest fully in his lap. The lantern's glow, though absent, seemed to linger in memory, pulsing softly at the edges of vision. The boy let his eyes wander across the horizon. Here were echoes of all he had seen. The library of clouds, the feast, the garden in the sky, rivers of names, the songs of the stars. Each fragment shimmered faintly in the folds of memory, stitched together by the journey. He realized then that life, or whatever came after life, was made not of dramatic endings, but quiet continuations. Each memory, each song, each tender gesture he had witnessed or carried forward was a thread connecting him to the universe and to those he loved. He thought of his sister first. Her voice, her laughter, her glow, all woven now into the constellations above. He closed his eyes and whispered to her, not in words that needed answer, but in those that needed acknowledgement. I see you. I hear you. You are still with me. And somewhere beyond the veil of stars he felt her warmth. It was not the presence of flesh or form, but something subtler, finer. A song, a pulse, a memory that shimmered quietly through everything. The child lifted his head, still half asleep. Will you be with me too? The boy smiled, heartful. Always. I carry you every step, every breath. You are part of me now. And I am part of you. The child pressed close again, safe, whole, unafraid. The boy's arms around him were steady and strong, not clinging, not desperate, just present. They did not need to move. The road had taken them far enough, and the quiet had opened wide enough to hold them. Orgalorg appeared one last time, wings folding softly around the hilltop. He did not speak immediately. He simply watched, his eyes reflecting the glow of countless memories. Then he murmured, voice gentle as a breeze, Few find this place. Fewer still accept its quiet. You have done more than walk. You have held. You have loved. And that is the greatest courage. The boy nodded, letting the words sink. Courage, he realized, was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was simply continuing, simply caring, simply being present even when the world seemed too vast or too empty. The wind stirred, carrying faint scents of distant flowers, of bread, of river water, of starlight. The boy breathed it in. Each inhalation felt like a connection to everything that had passed and everything yet to come. He thought of the road, the void, the lantern, the feast, and the songs of stars. They had been teachers, guides, and companions. And now, finally, he could rest in their lessons. He lowered his head, resting against the child. It's okay to sleep, he whispered. It's okay to let it all be gentle now. The child's soft breath slowed, deepened, and finally blended with the boy's own. They did not need words to speak. Presence itself was enough. He remembered his sister one final time, her advice and warmth echoing through the quiet. Love every part, she had said. He now understood the depth of that lesson. To love every part meant to walk through shadow, to embrace grief, to carry memory, to release fear, and to rest in silence. The boy closed his eyes, letting the quiet cradle him, as it had cradled so many moments before. The void, the stars, the road, the rivers, they were not endings. They were lullabies, gentle, endless, serene, and he let himself fall into them. The child in his arms shifted slightly, murmuring in dream, and he smiled through his own tears. They were not afraid, not lonely, not lost. They were simply here together, in the gentle fold of night that stretched beyond time and space. The boy whispered softly, almost to himself, Thank you for walking with me. Thank you for letting me hold you. Thank you for being here. The stars above twinkled faintly, a soft reply. The wind sighed. The lantern, though no longer present, lingered in memory like warmth in the chest. Everything, the journey, the love, the loss, the quiet triumph, was complete. He pressed his cheek against the child's head. Good night, he murmured. Sleep well. And in that quiet, they rested, not in fear, not in sadness, but in gentle, endless peace. And somewhere beyond sight and sound, the boy's sister hummed faintly with the stars, smiling into eternity. The journey had ended. The road, the void, the stars, and even the child within him, the boy had walked it all. And still in a quiet way he carried everything forward. A final exhale, a soft heartbeat, a gentle smile. Good night.